Mr. Mayor, you're now live.
Right, a quorum being present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is a resolution to close the meeting to the public. We will be adding a new item to the closed agenda under labor. And therefore, the recommendation is that council close the meeting at 4:03 p.m. to the public on the basis of sections 91B and C of the Community Charter as matters pertain to personal information about identifiable individuals for being considered for municipal award or honor and labor relation or other employee matters. Could would a member of council like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Finley and seconded by Councillor Callio. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. Will now
Mr. Mayor, you're now live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging we're gathered here today on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. The first item to deal with at this point is approval of the consent agenda. Councillor Manas and I will be declaring a conflict of interest as one of the items relates to the Clement Centre for Families, and we had both declared a conflict of interest due to our spouse's employment with that organization. So I'm going to hand over the chair duties to Councillor Toporowski, and then Councillor Manas and I will be returning to the meeting. Thank you.
All right, they have left the room. Approval of the consent agenda. Would there be any items removed to be placed under new business? I will be pulling 4.1.3 and adding that to the new business. So, seeing no others, we will move on to the next one is approval of the regular agenda. Yep. Do I do that one? No? Okay.
So it's this motion here as amended.
Oh, okay, thank you. So it's moved and seconded, or moved? Seconded? Okay. It's moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as amended and the recommendations contained therein. All in favor? Thank you. That's it.
All right, our next item on the agenda is the approval of the regular agenda. I'd like to remove item 7.3 as we aren't going to be receiving a delegation from Providence Farm on today's meeting. I'd also like to reorder some of the items. So for the RCMP quarterly report to come before delegations, so that's item 10.1. And then also item 12.1, the Robert Street development to come before bylaws. Moved by Councillor Manhas, seconded by Councillor Stash. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move on to Mayor's report, and I'll keep it brief as I know we've got a lot on our agenda today. Yeah, we're going to touch on a couple points here. One is part of our role as a council, as you all know, is advocating to the senior levels of government for changes in policy and new funding and resources to address some of the challenges we face here at the local level. Traditionally, we focused much of our advocacy efforts at the Union of BC Municipalities Convention that's held every September. We were given an opportunity to meet with provincial cabinet ministers, and the challenge with this is it's basically speed dating, as we're given about 10 minutes to make our case at a time when we've got every other municipality across BC also trying to get these provincial cabinet ministers' attention. So what we've been doing here at the municipality in recent months is in working with senior staff, I've been scheduling meetings with the provincial ministers outside the Union of BC Municipality cycle. And you know, we're an hour away from the provincial capital, and typically these meetings can be much longer and allow us to make a much stronger case for some of our requests here at the municipality. Earlier this month, Councillor Toporowski and I met with the Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Alana Popham, as well as the Parliamentary Secretary for Forestry, Doug Routley, to discuss some of our shared priorities at the provincial and municipal level. I know we appreciated the chance to highlight some of the opportunities in North Cowichan to expand the tourism sector, support our local artists, preserve our heritage sites, and to strengthen our partnerships with sports organizations such as Rowing Canada. And you know, the Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture was you know, definitely interested in further conversations and asked that we schedule a follow-up meeting with her at the Union of BC Municipalities convention coming up next month. We've also got meetings scheduled later this month with the Minister of Environment, likely the Minister of Forests, and then in early September with the Minister of Transportation, and hope to continue to take this approach to advocacy. Again, scheduling as many of these meetings as we can outside of the Union of BC Municipalities cycle. I'd also like to take a moment to mention that the World Dwarf Games were held earlier this month, and North Cowichan resident Declan Forcier, who is here with us here in the gallery, was the only athlete from British Columbia on Team Canada. The team was made up of 46 athletes from across the country who joined over 500 athletes from over 20 different countries in Cologne, Germany, for the largest international sporting event held exclusively for athletes with dwarfism. Over a week's time, athletes competed in 10 sporting events, testing their athletic abilities with others of similar stature. Declan had a very successful games, competing in 4 disciplines: track and field, volleyball, basketball, and soccer. He medaled in each of his events, including earning gold in all 4 of his individual track and field events. These include gold medals in the 40-meter sprint, the 60-meter sprint, the tennis ball throw, and the cricket ball throw, a silver medal for volleyball, bronze medals for soccer and basketball. I'd like to ask Council, everyone in the gallery, please join me in recognizing Declan's impressive athletic accomplishments. Now, on behalf of the municipality of North Cowichan, I'd like to present Declan with a certificate acknowledging his participation and achievements at the World Dwarf Games. Declan, you wouldn't mind joining me up here? Congratulations. Yeah. I think Heather's going to get a photo of us together.
Mayor, do you mind getting one to stand behind your head?
Sure, yeah.
Just
If you want to come up here. Yeah.
Go up that mayor's head.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not on video. Do you want some dinner?
I won't let Dan sit in the chair. No. All right.
Pull your medals up too, Declan, if you don't mind. Just be amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, and if I could mention it, Council as well, some of you may notice Declan's mom is Tammy Isaacson, who's one of our very talented staff here at the municipality on the communications team. All right, we'll now move on to the next item on our agenda is the RCMP quarterly report from Staff Sergeant Beard.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Douglas and councillors, for the opportunity to meet with you tonight. I brought my notebook here because I anticipate some questions that I won't be able to answer, so I'll be able to get back to you later with those. I thought what I would do is I would go through some of the highlights over the highlights of crime statistics from April to June of this year and compare them against this time last year. For the entire policing area over the quarter, a total of 5,400 calls for service were received, and that's compared to about 5,000 this time last year. That's a 6% increase in our call volume. Approximately 35% of our calls are criminal in nature. Specifically for the municipality of North Cowichan, most crime types were relatively consistent. Crimes against persons were up 26%. In hard numbers, that's an increase of 40 calls for service spread over 3 months. The majority of the change was due to assaults with an increase of 31 files. We are seeing an increase in the severity of assaults as well. Many assaults are in the corridor and the Cow Tribes area. Also contributing to the quarterly increase were sexual assaults, extortion, and uttering threats with an additional 17 reports. This is spread over 3 months. Extortions have been primarily sexual extortions and involve the young males who are predominantly where they take photos, they're sharing intimate images and of themselves and they're sent online. This is a regional problem, so it's not unique to Duncan, North Cowichan. Sexual assaults were up by 6 files. These were typically concentrated in the Cowichan Commons area and Warmlands area. Victims were female. Majority were experiencing homelessness. They were intoxicated by alcohol or drugs and then victimized when they were passed out. Crimes against property were up by 5%. B&Es and PSP, or possession of stolen property, contributed to the most of these results. Approximately half of the B&Es and stolen property files occurred in the north end of the corridor in and around the Beverly, Canada Avenue, James Howard area. Three quarters of the possession of stolen property files were solved. They were recovered. Stolen vehicles of note on the island, stolen autos were high in the spring and early summer. Police were able to arrest a number of multi-jurisdictional vehicle offenders and have them detained, but this type of activity appears to be an ongoing opportunity for criminals. In our jurisdiction, arsons were also up. We had 22 arsons reported for the corridor. 20 of them occurred in the corridor area. Of the 22 ignitions, 15 were to dumpsters or garbage cans and bins, 2 were to vehicles, and the 5 remaining were campfires, debris, playground, tree, and a small warming fire. For location types, 13 occurred in streets or parking lots, and 5 occurred in an open area or park, and then 4 remaining were at various location types. With drug decriminalization, CDSA or drug offenses were down significantly. That's you might notice in the package I sent around. That's about 80% down. A lot of that has to do with the decriminalization of drugs earlier this year. We did lay 4 trafficking charges, 2 at the street level and 2 involving drug houses. Mental Health Act related calls were down 37%. Mental Health Act apprehensions, though, were up 32%, or about 20 files. Missing persons investigations for the Valley continued to increase. We had 127 reports for April to June. This compares to 70 reported the same time in 2022. All missing persons reports have been located. Many reports come from Cow Tribes. This included a repeat missing youth. 45% were youth missing from group homes. Prisoner counts for the municipality for April to June increased to 131 versus 80. I asked and tried to study some of the stats on this one. I couldn't really come up with a good explanation why we're seeing an increase in prisoner counts over the 3 months. Now, it's important to keep in mind that it's a small snapshot of time, and it's really hard to be able to say crime patterns are symptomatic of this because it's just too small of a sample size. So just kind of keep all that in mind as you're balancing or weighing these numbers. We're trying to maintain a visible presence in the corridor area. As you're probably aware, we had a couple of serious incidents earlier this spring, and that did impact our resourcing levels, and we had to redeploy some of our members to support our front line. Detachment is actively participating in the Repeat Violent Offender Initiative coordinated by Corrections Canada. It's an enhanced case management initiative to focus on prioritizing public safety by managing risk related to certain offenders. We've been working with 2 landowners on Lewis Street, and I can report that that problem that we were having with encampments has probably been solved now as of today, as of this week. Lots of help with municipality of North Cowichan bylaw folks. And then, of course, the participation and cooperation from the landowners was helpful. We started new detachment tours, so if you haven't had one, please let me know and I can make that arrangement. We're expecting to be occupying the building in March. I anticipated it was going to be December, but it's actually been pushed out. There's some more construction things that have to happen. And we're continuing to work on our annual performance plan objectives for the year. We've come up short, as you can probably tell from the report. That has a lot to do with the resourcing levels at the detachment, but we're quite positive that we can bounce back and do better as we progress through the fiscal. And I'm very happy to advise that Constable Wes Richens has managed to raise $20,000 for the Tour de Rock, the Cops for Cancer initiative for this year. So we have he has a silent auction planned for August the 25th this year, or this month. So that'll be the last initiative before the big ride in September. So, sir, subject to any questions, that's my presentation.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant Beard. Questions from council? Councillor Manhas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Inspector Baird, for your presentation. I see in the 5 sub-areas you have identified as micro areas of activity. Warmlands an area has gone up, increased by 32%. Cowichan Commons increased by 20%. And those are areas where we have the OPS site, and then on the Cowichan Commons, we also have the Paddle Road housing complex. Do you anticipate the same increase in activity on White Road once that's opened?
That's an excellent question. What I'll do is I'm going to wait, and I'd like to wait as opposed to trying to predict. I'd like to wait to see what actually happens there. It's hard to plan. It's hard to anticipate until we're quite a bit reactionary. So it's hard to anticipate that kind of change. We'll see how things turn out there, but I really have no thoughts on that one. Sorry.
So I actually think these numbers are lower because those were just the calls that go into the RCMP. They're not the calls that go into bylaw and to footprint security. So the numbers are actually higher.
You're right. Yes, 100%.
Yep. And can I have a couple follow-ups?
Of course, a follow-up.
You mentioned the increase in the prisoners right now. I know it's a small number but the percentage seems higher. Could that be due to the severity of crime? That is increase in severity of crime? Another
good question. So when I have a look at the prisoner stats, many of our prisoners they're in custody for less than 24 hours, most cases. And alcohol and drugs play a major factor in behavior. So there's something out there that is changed. We still, our primary goal at the detachment is to limit the number of people that are in custody at any given time. I come into the office at 6 in the morning, and lots of times there's nobody in cells, which is a lot different than when I used to work here back in 2012 to 14. So we're working very hard to maintain low prisoner counts. Nevertheless, we have seen that increase. So it's hard to really put my finger exactly on what it is, but I do know that alcohol and drugs is definitely a common denominator there.
A comment. I know the decriminalization of 2.5 grams, so with the provincial government wanted 4 grams actually decriminalized. I think 2.5 grams what the feds gave was too much anyways, in my view. But I think that could be a consequence of why you're seeing more drug use and stuff on the open streets. So, right. And just a comment here, thank you very much for the Lewis Street, cleaning the Lewis Street, that lot on Lewis Street. I had many calls and reported that to staff here a few weeks ago, and I was told that because it's private property, you need RCMP and intervention in that. And thank you very much for doing that. And I did see, drove by there yesterday, and I see that the tree canopy cover is actually being removed too. So, you know, we're trying to do something for the environment here, but then because of this situation, we're losing out. So I just want to make that comment.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. In the process of this change, there was some loss of some fruit trees as well, and I regret that.
Yeah, thank you.
Outcome.
Councillor Justice?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for the report. Always interesting to hear it and see what's going on in the community. And I really understand what you're saying about small numbers. And sometimes you look at it and you go, wow, 75% increase in arsons, and there's like one more fire than before, or something like that. So it's hard. But what I wanted to ask you is, statistics aside, and taking into consideration seasonality and all of those other things, what are your observations, the good and the bad, of the effect of decriminalization on the situation in our community?
Well, all I can do is really draw a bit of a parallel from my previous post here. When I was here from 12 to 14, the presence of the harder illegal drugs like the heroines and the methamphetamines, that was not common. And it was not common for me to come across overdose situations in the corridor. Now when I do my foot patrols, I notice it a lot. Now I can't draw an inference from that to anything in particular. However, I can say that I have seen a difference in the types of crime and the breadth of what we see there in relation to some of the latest changes. How's that?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Justice?
No, thanks.
Councillor Stash?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff Sergeant Beard, thank you for the presentation. Just curiosity on any correspondence or meetings you might have with your colleagues in Nanaimo or Port Alberni, Campbell River, other areas kind of, I mean, Nanaimo's a lot bigger, but maybe Port Alberni or Campbell River that are population-wise comparable. How do we, I don't want to have a scale of where do we sit, but I just wanted to see that it's comparable across all areas and everybody's sharing the same experience and it's not anything. Is there anything unique or different about the Duncan, North Cowichan region?
That's another good question. I would have to say that I can't see a difference from community to community. We are all experiencing the same kind of crime types, calls for service. Different areas have more calls for service than others, but I think by and large we're on this spectrum. We're all on the same spectrum, so no difference there, I don't think, from community to community.
Any further questions from council? All right, if I could just make a comment, it was obviously a tough blow for us losing Inspector Bear, but just want to thank you, Staff Sergeant Beard, for all your hard work. I know Councillor Manas mentioned some of the concerns with Lewis Street, and I know you and I have discussed this and met with residents there, and really appreciate how responsive you've been to that. I know you've followed up with different business owners in the corridor area as well who have facing growing challenges. And also our next item here is a presentation from our Member of Parliament on bail reform, and I know you've been involved in discussions here at Municipal Hall around how that might impact us here locally. So again, just want to express on behalf of the council and municipality all your hard work stepping in this role in these last few months.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to now invite our Member of Parliament for Couch Malahat Langford, Alistair McGregor.
Mr. Mayor, before you invite him up, there is the recommendation regarding the endorsement of their
of course.
APP.
Yeah. Yeah, so council notice in the item 10.1, in addition to the quarterly report, there is the annual performance plan initiatives. So again, as our corporate officer mentioned, the recommendation is that council endorse the North Cowichan Duncan RCMP detachment 2023-2024 annual performance plan initiatives as presented. Moved by Councillor Toporowski, seconded by Councillor Callio. Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. All right, and I'll move back to delegations, and I'd like to invite our Member of Parliament, Alistair McGregor, to step up to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I really do appreciate this opportunity. I'd like to thank you for carving out your valuable time to hear on a subject that I think we all agree is quite important, given the statistics that you just heard. The return of Parliament is not so far away. The House is due to resume its schedule on Monday, September 18th. And I think one of the items that will be quickly coming up for debate is Bill C-48. So I'm here today to give a brief presentation on that bill, some of the circumstances that led to it, but also to open up to questions and comments. And I hope to be informed by councillors' questions and comments so that when we do debate this bill, I can take some of that feedback with me to the House. So you may recall that earlier this year, all of Canada's premiers wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, and it was following the death of police officers while on duty in Ontario who had been killed by someone who was out on bail. And so there had been a number of violent incidences of people who had been out on bail, had breached the conditions of their bail, and had committed more violent acts. So this led to all of the premiers writing to the Prime Minister urging for action on bail reform. Since that time, the Federal Justice Minister, former Justice Minister, and the Public Safety Minister, they've been meeting with their provincial counterparts. And as a result, you saw the birth of Bill C-48. So I do want to acknowledge that the public concern about the bail system is real. It's something that we do need to approach with a pragmatic and achievable solutions, and it's really ultimately with the goal of public safety in mind. It's also important, though, that we put this in the context, and I think it's important that we remember the applicable sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because, of course, any law passed by Parliament cannot be in contravention of the Charter. I'd like to specifically draw the attention of Council to Section 11. There are several sections, but essentially everyone has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. And they also have the right to not be denied reasonable bail without just cause. Also under Section 7, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and they cannot be deprived of those except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. So those are the principles that we must all abide by when we're looking at changing our laws. Also, the Supreme Court of Canada has had a few occasions to weigh in on interpretations of that section. And they have interpreted the limits on bail to mean that bail may only be denied in a narrow set of circumstances. And generally, this is 3 areas. So bail could be denied if the accused is unlikely to appear for trial. Bail can be denied if the accused poses a risk to public safety. And it can also be denied to maintain confidence in the administration of justice, which is a pretty broad term open to interpretation. I think we all know that conditions can be attached to bail. Just briefly, someone can be required to appear in court on a specific date at a certain time. A person can be required to report to a peace officer, to remain in a specified area, but also to abstain from visiting a certain area. They can be required to notify a peace officer in changes of address or employment, abstain in communication with certain individuals, and they can also be forced to comply with conditions such as a curfew, no alcohol, and no drugs. It's also important to remember that when we're talking about our criminal justice system, it is somewhat of a shared jurisdiction. So the federal government in the House of Commons, we have exclusive jurisdiction over our criminal code. So we set the rules, the procedures, and the considerations that a justice must follow when deciding whether or not to make an order for judicial interim release, which is the proper name for bail. And of course, our provincial governments have the powers to make laws in relation to the administration of justice. So that's the practical procedures and policies for bail hearings, and also whether a judge or a justice of the peace is overseeing the hearing, and also the directives that can be given to Crown prosecutors. So that's how the 2 levels of government work together. Prior to the tabling of Bill C-48, there was work being done, particularly the House of Commons Standing Committee on Justice. There was an all-party support for a motion of study into Canada's bail system, and actually that committee was just getting ready to issue their draft report when the bill was introduced on May 16th of this year. So let's get into the heart of the matter. What does Bill C-48 does? It does propose a number of changes to help address the challenges posed at the bail stage by repeat violent offenders with weapons, including for offenses involving firearms, knives, and bear spray. So essentially, we're looking at amendments to the criminal code, which would create a new reverse onus to target serious repeat violent offenders involving weapons, expand the list of firearms offenses that trigger a reverse onus, broaden the reverse onus targeting repeat offenders of intimate partner violence, clarify the meaning of the terms prohibition order in an existing reverse onus for offenses involving weapons, and also a requirement that the courts consider an accused person's history of convictions for violence and community safety and security concerns when making a bail decision. Essentially, when in most charges, it is up to the prosecution to show why an accused person should be denied bail and held in custody. When we're talking about reverse onus, the burden of proof is now shifted onto the accused. And the presumption is that the accused will be detained while awaiting their trial unless they can demonstrate to the court that they should be released. So it's put onto the accused, especially if they have a violent history, to show to the court that they will not be a danger to public safety, and it's up to them to establish that burden of proof. And of course, you know, I also want to make a point too that in addition to Bill C-48, we've been very successful at negotiating with the federal government in making sure that we include community-based bail supervision programs. We want to make sure that these are widely available because they are going to very much contribute to public safety. We want to ensure that there's effective supervision of people who are out on bail, but also allow those people who lack personal resources to actually have the opportunity to get bail, because often it involves a surety, and many people don't have access to the resources. And right now, police basically don't have any kind of a mandate or resources for bail supervision. We depend on that system of personal sureties, where a person charged gets a friend or a relative with a stable address or job to basically guarantee, and they will pay a fine if the bail conditions are violated. So in most cases, this is basically no supervision at all. And we also want to ensure that you know, remote and rural communities have proper funding, because often they seem to be the last ones that are thought of. Like when we're thinking of crime rates, it's usually Canada's big cities that gets the lion's share of the attention. I will conclude by saying that the bill has been met with a lot of positive reception. When the bill was introduced, we had positive quotes from the Canadian Police Association, from the Police Association of Ontario, the Toronto Police Association, and the Ontario Provincial Police Association. So they have all urged that this piece of legislation get passed quickly, and it remains to be seen as to, like, when we return, how the government attaches priority to this bill. But we're certainly ready for a second reading debate, vote, and getting it to committee so that we can look if there's any fine-tuning changes that need to be made. So with that, I'll conclude, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gregg. We appreciate the overview of this issue, which, as you mentioned, affects so many communities right across Canada. I'll turn it over to, I know we've discussed this, the two of us, in quite a bit of detail, so I'll turn it over to council and see if there's any questions. Councillor Stash.
No questions, actually. Your worship, thank you, MP McGregor, for coming and presenting to us tonight. And the one word in there that increasing the reach of the bail reform was the term that community safety concerns can now be considered. And from friends that are in the worst affected areas here in the North Cowichan corridor, it's those bad actors in the area that are of community concerns that are agitating and causing issues within the homeless and mental health affected community that are on the streets, and those with addictions. And it's good to see that there's a tool in there that possibly can be used by the local RCMP to better serve the community and those people that are already at risk in the street that are being preyed upon by the bad element within. So it's good to see that there's going to be there, and hopefully that the priority is right at the top. So thank you.
Councillor Callio, then Councillor Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd like to also thank you, Alistair, for coming in today and giving us this presentation. I think one of the best things that's in this bill is the reverse onus, where a prisoner actually, a person who has been apprehended has to prove that they have the right to be able to be on the street. I think that you know, like Councillor Eustache had just said that, you know, we can't have these people through a revolving door process. And I think this is the bill that, you know, could possibly get this fixed. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, don't quote me on the stats, but that's, you know, the popular term is the 90-10 rule. 10% are causing 90% of the problems. And I think this is a very surgical strike and amendment to the criminal code. But yeah, we have just had too many instances where people, especially with previous violent convictions involving weapons and assault, have been out on bail and they have clearly violated the conditions. And yeah, I think given the fact that you saw 13 premiers write that letter, obviously there was a big fix that was needed.
Councillor Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Alice McGregor, for the presentation. You mentioned three ways for not to deny bail. To deny bail in the 1982 charter. One of them was risk to public safety, and so this doesn't. There is so much risk to safety, to public safety, in the last little while, 4 years. But still, these people are being let on the street. So that's not a new change. Okay, the repeat offenders is a change, which is very much appreciated. But the yeah, I think this should have been done many years ago. I think you guys actually you guys control government, and NDP, right? You guys have the balance of power, and we could have got this done 3, 4, 5 years ago. Well, I just think it's way too late, and I'm glad at least we're moving on this now. But yeah, I just think it could be done a lot sooner with your pressure on the government, especially during a minority government. Minority governments can, you know, they have balance of power.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. McGregor.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we really only have had the agreement in place for this Parliament for the last 2 years. But again, like a substantive change to the criminal justice system has to be one that's led by the government. And I think, you know, you needed to see that collaboration with the province's respective ministers, both in justice and in public safety, because of the shared jurisdiction. So I agree with you. Things could have been done much sooner, but I think those considerations for public safety have always been there. But I think it's you know, judges have many tools open to them in interpreting the criminal code. But the very fact that C-48 is now codifying these as requirements means that a judge must always consider them. And I think reversing that, putting the reverse onus in place is an important measure.
Yeah, I just hope things work out for the public safety.
Yeah, I would just add, Councillor Manhas, that and Mr. McGregor did meet with us here at Municipal and with the RCMP, and very much wanted our input on this issue. And he's presenting to us this evening to get our input, and I believe was at City of Duncan Council earlier this week as well. So yeah, I certainly appreciate your attention to this matter and your interest in hearing from the community about how to make this a priority in Ottawa. I'll turn it over to Councillor Justice and Councillor Finlay.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, MP McGregor. I actually don't know how to, I should say Mr. McGregor, or is it MP McGregor? I know, in normal circumstances, yeah. And it's great that you're coming here and presenting us with this stuff and helping us sort of connect. It's obviously a big community problem that will benefit from this. I think it's really important. This is just really curiosity in some ways, but I was curious about how the principle of reverse onus articulates legally and philosophically with the charter rights that you mentioned and the idea that you're innocent until proven guilty. Is there any interesting subtleties there that?
Don't quote me on this, and I can get a much more in-depth legal opinion, but I mean, it's important to remember when you're looking at the Charter that the rights contained in the Charter are not absolute. A lot of people, when they're quoting the Charter, seem to skip over Section 1, which lays out the groundwork that, you know, the rights following are not absolute and they can be limited in reasonable cases. And so, as has to be justified in a free, open, and democratic society, I'm paraphrasing there. So none of the rights in the charter are absolute, except for the right to vote. That can't be taken away, but by the others, there can be reasonable limits placed on them. And I think to pass the test, that's why we have a Supreme Court to help guide us. And that's why in previous decisions, they have, through some of their rulings, carefully crafted a little bit more of a specific interpretation of certain sections, especially Section 11, because they did craft out where a narrow set of circumstances where that right could be slightly infringed upon. And what it comes down to is balancing the rights of the individual versus the rights of society at large, and public safety can figure as a big factor in those considerations. So it is a careful balancing act, but I think that the premiers, the Prime Minister, the respective ministers of justice and public safety, I think they've done their homework with their legal teams, and I think Bill C-48 will probably withstand a charter challenge based on those reasons.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alistair, for coming by and sharing this with you. The question I have is, we're really putting the onus on the judges to make the decision on bail, the reverse onus, and so forth. Is there some way to have in the criminal code a 3 strikes you're out type policy? I mean, because otherwise we're really just relying on the judge's expertise, and obviously they're skilled to be in the position. But if someone keeps coming back and doing the similar crimes and getting out, and similar crimes and getting out, like, is there some way to put something a little more, I don't say harsh, that's not the right, maybe that's the right word, more significant in the bill, so that it might deter this sort of situation?
There's always a possibility. I think that's why getting this bill to the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights is important. I don't think there's going to be much opposition to this bill, and I hope all parties in the House can come to some kind of an agreement to a speedy vote at second reading to get it to committee where that important work can be done, to see if there are some amendments. But yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that you referred to the 3 strikes you're out. I think that's a case, a type of system that's used down with our southern neighbor quite a bit. But I think by virtue of the fact that a person with a previous record of convictions, especially ones involving violence, assaults with weapons, the fact that the onus is now on them to prove that they won't be a public safety, that's a significant shift, because now the prosecutor doesn't have to go to all of that extra work proving to the judge. It now falls on the accused. And yeah, I think judges, they're citizens as well. They don't live in a bubble, and I think they too can sense which way the public mood is swaying as well. So, but yeah, we need to get it to committee so that we can hear from witnesses and get that kind of feedback, and perhaps that might be room for a little bit more clarity and specificity in the bill.
Mr. McGregor, just a couple questions. I know we went over at Municipal Hall when we met last month, but just for council's benefit, one is, will you anticipate kind of realistic timelines for getting this through second reading to committee and to finally Royal Assent adoption? And also, any advice you have for our council in terms of how we can support you in making this a priority in Ottawa? And I know you and I discussed the possibility of perhaps myself and the Duncan Mayor writing a joint letter to the Federal Justice Minister, just highlighting that this is a big issue here, which would provide you with some help in terms of raising that in Parliament.
Well, I mean, in my time in the House, I've seen bills pass quickly. I mean, some bills have passed by unanimous consent through all stages in one day. I don't see Bill C-48 doing that, but I could see all-party agreement to at least limiting debate, maybe to 1 speaker from each party at second reading and then coming to a vote. I think given the fact that you've already had such strong support from several police associations, signals that the law enforcement community in particular is looking to Canada's members of Parliament to, do their part of the bargain. And yeah, it's, you know, we'll have to take a look at the docket that's set by the House of Commons, by the government, and hopefully when we return that first week of September, they put it up for debate right away, and hopefully our respective critics, especially for justice and the Justice Minister, will be having those conversations to see if unanimity can be reached.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from council? Councillor Manhas?
I think it's good to see that our new Justice Minister is actually an ex-police officer, I do believe. Bill Blair, he said, so I think it's good. No, am I wrong?
Bill Blair is now the Defense Minister, and our new Justice Minister is Arif Virani.
Yeah, and he's a lawyer, so.
All right, well, thanks again, Mr. McGregor, and I think on behalf of council, I could say we appreciate you coming here and getting our perspective on this issue, and for all your work and making this a priority in Ottawa.
I appreciate that, and yeah, you know, I'm happy to receive correspondence from individual councillors or council as a whole, and I'd be happy to take your comments and feedback and hopefully incorporate it if I get a chance to speak to the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now turn to our next delegation, which is an overview of the Forest Stewardship Council Canada and Community Forest Standard. I'd like to invite Oren Quinn and Arnie Burkov up to the lectern.
Well, I think I'll just sit here.
All right.
Because I'm older. I'll come up when you finish with me.
Mr. Quinn, I believe you have a presentation.
I did actually had a PowerPoint.
Perfect.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. We've had, I am Oren Quinn, Western Canada Manager for Forest Stewardship Council, based in Nanoose Bay on the island here. And I came with Arno Burkhoff, who is a retired board member from FSC Canada and also the past president of the Private and Public Workers of Canada. Today I'm going to talk briefly about Forest Stewardship Council certification and how it potentially could be applied to the Municipal Forest Reserve. I think this is my remote here. Is that right? Okay, so I'll give a brief overview. FSC is fairly complicated in its structure because it is a very thorough standard based on environmental, social, and economic values, but I'll provide an overview for today. We'll look at some tools that are applied with FSC and review 2 quick case studies that are also certified under FSC, one being Burns Lake Community Forest and the other one the Haida Nation Tawn Forest on Haida Gwaii. And then we'll talk about the potential value proposition for the Municipal Forest Reserve. Okay, so FSC came about over 30 years ago after the Rio de Janeiro Summit, United Nations meeting, where a standard was drafted for the world for leaders to buy into and adopt. Unfortunately, it wasn't adopted, and what came out of it was a voluntary independent certification scheme that forest companies can adopt and promote their social license in forest management. So the main focus points were to prevent deforestation, protect species at risk, and also protect workers and Indigenous peoples and local communities. It's recognized as a global standard across the world. It is the toughest standard in the world to adopt. As it stands right now, we have over 1,200 members across 92 different countries with over 200 million hectares certified, just under 50 million hectares in Canada, and that results in 50,000 forest management certificates and other promotional licenses. So this is just a graph, or a display of the different membership structure and concentrations of members around the world. It's based on a structure of membership, as discussed. It's broken into 4 different chambers. So there's a social chamber. So that would be where Arnie is a member, or has been a member in the past of the social chamber. Unions, social organizations, communities. Environmental Chamber is the second chamber, and that's comprised of a lot of environmental organizations in Canada and around the world. We have an Economic Chamber, and that's usually the head of the forest companies, sustainable practices. They'll sit as an economic member. And then we also have an Indigenous Chamber, which is unique to Canada, and it's nowhere else in the FSC system do they have a fourth chamber. So, you know, and that supports Indigenous rights and free, prior, and informed consent in Canada. Okay, so looking at a map, just to give you guys a quick display of what areas are certified. If you look at the top of the map, on the left, there's a star there. In the west, that's Burns Lake Community Forest. Up in Haida Gwaii in the top left is certified. And on the bottom right is a large red area. That's Canadian Forest Products Kootenay Division that are FSC certified. And as you move towards the east, you have ALPAC with 5 million hectares certified, and then Mystic Management, Indigenous Organization, and then the majority of the rest of the certificates are in Eastern Canada, Ontario, Quebec, and a little bit in the Maritimes. So just a quick display to let you guys know where the certifications are. FSC is based on a principle structure. The standards are created from these main principles. So you have a principle on community engagement. You have a principle on workers' rights, meeting legal requirements. You have a principle on protecting for environmental values, and another term we use called high conservation values. And from that, you develop a management plan and then have implement your management activities and monitor. Monitoring is a big part of FSC, and that's what sets FSC aside from other certification schemes. You actually have to have a public monitoring report that goes up online for all your community to view and comment on and provide feedback and basically have at their access when they need it. So there's the key tools in FSC. We just call them tools because there's a number of different things that stand out with FSC. There's a requirement around stakeholder engagement, and North Cowichan obviously have very engaged in stakeholder engagement through your process with your municipal forest. We have an environmental values assessment that needs to be done. And then we have something called a high conservation value forest, and that's managing for species at risk, red listed species, cultural values, large intact areas that haven't been impacted by forest management activities, community needs. Those are all high conservation values. And then we have a range of natural variation assessment, which is looking at the forest, what it looked like prior to industrial forestry, and then that's usually the focus point for restoration. So if you have certain ecological areas that have been damaged or have excessive harvesting and underrepresented, then you would focus on those areas to restore first. And we also have something called our free, prior, and informed consent guidance, and that's a guidance that's been adopted around the world to engage with Indigenous organizations. And that's a process of just mutual respect. You don't require FPIC, they call it. You don't require FPIC right away to become certified, but you have to be engaged in a process of mutual respect with the Indigenous communities, and they have to be bought into the process and seeing a value from it. We also have an annual monitoring report, which I discussed briefly a minute ago. That's available online. And then the final tool is the management plan, which we reference for auditing each year. Okay, so as a quick synopsis of a couple different scenarios, we have Burns Lake Community Forest. They've been FSC certified, I think, for about 6 years now. They're at a bit of a point. It's a community forest with Indigenous First Nations partnership. And they're at a point, I guess, at one point where they were struggling with their community forests and having buy-in from the local community. They adopted FSC. It created a structure and a format for them to follow, which allowed them to come to the table and come to agreement on how to move forward to provide benefits for the local community. The picture up here just shows their annual monitoring report, which is online publicly, and then just a picture of the community forest members. So there's another quote directly on their website. FSC became the key avenue to restart the conversation environmental stewardship and wildlife components are aligned with FSC and what their partners value in their territory. So this created a deeper personal relationship with members of the nation and the staff where they could work together and have a shared vision. Another example, Tawn Forest up in Haida Gwaii became certified also about 7 or 8 years ago. All of Tawn Forest they have, I think it's close to 500,000 hectares, I think, of certified area in Haida Gwaii. They've been active with FSC for quite a while. We're working on a bunch of different projects with Tawn Forest. So the next slide here is just going to describe a bit of what we've been working on. Sorry. Okay, so I've been engaged with the Haida, and we've effectively, they had a bit of challenge with their certification in earlier years. They hired consultants to do all their work. But when we started engaging with them 2 years ago, we worked through a process of training and building capacity within the nation, and that reduced a lot of the internal costs for the certification substantially. We've also supported with their external audits and their process around getting certified, and the certification body has to do an annual audit every year, and that's been very effective and a lot smoother over the last 2 years. Their monitoring process has been highly effective for them with their community. There's a lot of controversy, or a lot of, I guess, focus on the practices on Haida Gwaii because of the past history of over-harvesting on the island, the archipelago. So their own Haida Nation company is under a lot of pressure politically from the community to make sure they do a really good job, and they have to implement something called the Haida Gwaii Land Use Order.
Mr. Quinn, sorry to interrupt. We're coming up at the 10-minute limit, but I think council would like to see this presentation to the end. So I'm going to ask council if we get a motion to waive the 10-minute limit for the delegation. Moved by Councilor Toporowski, seconded by Councilor Justice. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. Another important point I wanted to raise here at this meeting is we have something called the FSC Ecosystem Service Claims. I understand that you're looking at carbon as an opportunity for your forest. We don't have carbon credits, we have claims. We have claims around recreation, watershed, biodiversity, carbon. And from the early assessment of those value of those claims, it's been identified that they could provide additional value to a company that is actually trying to sell carbon credits, having an additional value on top of it, FSC certified, based on the social value that it brings with the claim. The credit is deemed, I think has been deemed something of desirable for parties are interested in buying carbon credits. Just want to raise that. So another report from Tawn Forest on their monitoring. This is what you'll see on their website. So it's a combination of the social, economic, and environmental indicators. And you list is a big list here. It's online, but it covers everything that they find valuable within the community, down to species at risk management, how many workers you have locally, the values around landscape level biodiversity, wildlife, cultural values. It's all captured on this report and available to the community. So if you try to sum this all up, this is my last slide here. FSC provides a really transparent framework, I think, that the Forest Reserve could apply and comes with annual third-party audits that are considered highly credible in the system. And the FPIC guidance, the Free Prior Informed Consent guidance that we have created, I think is also a really good place to structure your engagement with local First Nations. And then as well, the ecosystem service procedure that I just talked about that allows you to place claims on top of your certification and promote the recreation or the carbon or the watershed values is also of, I think, of substantial value and is growing in real demand from the community. And I think it's an opportunity for you to showcase the value that you've already are doing on your land base. From a harvesting perspective, there's a niche market for FSC certified wood, especially when it comes to cedar and Douglas fir in the Pacific Northwest, so there's opportunity for premiums. And there is an opportunity to create a group structure which lowers your cost to become certified. And you just work with other members and share the costs. We also have a company organization called FSC Investment and Partnerships based in Seattle, and they link funders up with our certificate holders to provide additional value and find source funding to support your management activities and your conservation activities on your municipal forests. So these are just some key areas that we thought would provide value, could potentially provide value for the municipal forests, and that's where I stop.
Great, thank you, Mr. Quinn. Appreciate the overview of the FSC certification process. I'm gonna turn to council, see if there's any questions. Councillor Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Quinn, for your presentation, and Mr. Burkhoff. Thank you for being a standby for answering our questions. I have 4 questions. I'm not sure if I can answer. They're pretty short, actually. So
yeah, maybe start with a couple, and I'll see if any hands go up.
Okay. My first question is, why did you decide to come as a delegation to our council?
Maybe I want me to do that.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I think so. If you look at my career, and I'm an older guy, I started setting chokers. I thought McMillan would own the trees, and then owning part of a pulp mill when we got Harmac going. But you know, as I journeyed through that forest industry, I started to see the value in forests besides cutting trees, and I spent a lot of time on the FSC board. And then when we had talked to Rob about the North Cowichan Forest and what's going on, it's so complicated now, any piece of land. And I just thought that would be so much value. I mean, FSC is a nonprofit organization, but it provides tremendous value to how you see a forest rather than just looking at the trees, cutting them down. You look at every aspect, and so I think it's just a good fit. And we've got places going here, but as more and more communities, the industry's shrinking, but there's more opportunity for communities, indigenous, and things that didn't exist when I was a young guy, to do the right thing around forestry. So that's why we're here. We think it's a good fit.
That's perfect. I'm going to segue into my next question. Do you feel our forest practices in North Cowichan are not up to snuff?
Here, no, I think your practices are of high level, and I think they're very well aligned with the FSC principles and criteria. I don't see any major challenges with becoming certified. You've done a lot of the stakeholder engagement process. Obviously, you've engaged with UBC and 3 Green Tree and your analysis and your scenario planning. I mean, really, it's about getting the buy-in from the community and moving forward. And the auditors would just assess that, right? I don't see anything that would inhibit North Cowichan for meeting the requirements whatsoever.
We haven't seen any audit report as council, so.
Sorry?
We have not seen any audit report as council.
No, I mean, I just meant from auditing perspective when you do become FSC certified.
Okay, couple more short ones. You said you got there's an economic chamber. How many? Can you elaborate on how many forest executives on your economic chamber? Part of your economic chamber.
The economic chamber is the largest chamber for FSC Canada. I think we're probably up around 100 members.
And that's, how many in British Columbia?
Oh, in British Columbia might have 20.
Okay, and they're from major corporations, from Canforest, Interforest,
Canadian Forest
Western
Products,
Forest Products, and all that.
Yeah, not Western. Was it?
Yeah. But most of the forest companies here have what is called FSC chain of custody. So if they do get wood coming in or whatever, they can sell it as that. So that is just kind of a given for almost every forest company. They will have the chain of custody. But, just quickly back to something you said, the second one before, it's not about what people are doing so much in the forest, but it's really about if you get a change of a council or change of mayor, if you have that high level certification, it kind of just cements what you're doing there for future generations rather than leaving a forest to the political whims of a lot of different elements that will try and get in there. And that's the beauty of it. You get it audited every 5 years, every year, I guess.
Every year, yeah.
Every year.
Yeah.
So, there's forests that probably don't have certification that might be at a very high level, depending on the owner. But if he sells it or if you have a change or whatever, FSC gives you that gold standard baseline of how you're going to manage that forest. So when you retire from the council or, and all, you can say, well, we got a pretty good idea that the work that we did is gonna stay. That's the beauty of what
Yeah,
we're
but the
trying to do.
future councils can also decide to not be part of your association.
Sure, they could.
Yeah, anyone can make that decision.
But why would you?
Well, we don't know yet,
And we don't know.
right?
Yeah.
One
Hopefully they
last question is, you mentioned the reduction in certification costs. I think it was to the Haida Nation or to Burns Lake in your presentation. Not sure which one was certification, reduction in cost certification part of to certify with your organization, or?
Well, to get certified, you have to go through a certification body, such as a KPMG or a Rainforest Alliance type organization. And they have their annual auditing costs every year, but there's also the cost for the consultants as well to make sure you meet the requirements. At least Haida were using a lot of consultants to meet the requirements. They didn't have to. They had all the staff capabilities in place. So that was eliminated right when I started working with them, engaging with them, and we did some training, and they're highly competent and can handle it themselves. It's not that complicated. So we've eliminated the consultant costs. They also changed certification bodies and streamlined to a certification body that was located in Western Canada in Vancouver. So they've reduced their costs from the certification body as well during the audits, as opposed to having an auditor from Eastern Canada.
Okay, so that was certification costs for the FSC rather than another body to be certified within another body, a provincial body or something, or?
Yeah, you know, to become FSC certified, you have to go through one of the accredited certification bodies, and there's say four in Canada to choose from, and that's your sole cost, is your auditing costs, apart from getting up to speed and ready for the audit, and that happens every year. You have an annual audit cost, and there's also an accreditation fee you pay back to FSC, and that's what funds FSC, and that's usually a much smaller amount.
Good. Mr. Burkhoff, I think I met you before somewhere. I just can't place it where.
Well, you probably saw my mug in the paper when we were buying a pulp mill, because everybody.
Maybe with Levi. With Levi.
Oh, yeah.
Levi Sampson, that's where, okay.
I did have a conversation, we'll be here.
Okay, thanks.
Me and Levi.
Yeah, so maybe going on a tangent, Mr. Burkhoff discussed it briefly, but he was part of the group of employees at the Harmat Pulp Mill that led the employee ownership model.
Yeah.
So I've got Councillor Finley, then Councillor Justice.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I do have a couple questions. What would be the cost of certification for, say, our municipal forest reserve?
We'd have to do a bit of an assessment, but in the neighborhood of $7,500 to $10,000 for the first initial audit, and then each subsequent year after that would be much less. But the initial audit covers the whole standard, and then they do a portion of the standard every year after that.
Okay. Our forest reserve is highly respected, is my understanding, and one of the best in the country, if not the world, as far as our management practices have gone up to 2019, 2020. Why would we want to be FSC certified? What does that do? What does that
Well,
help
I think
us with?
first of all, you can make that statement based on a third-party independent audit that happens every year. You'd also would have the structure of creating a monitoring report annually that goes up on your website. It doesn't have to be that complicated, but it provides the results and the measuring all those metrics that we were talking about every year. Third, you can look at ecosystem services as a potential funding opportunity, right, to promote those claims with sponsorships that actually pay for it. And then other opportunities of bringing out other funding sources into your organization to support your conservation.
And I think if you look at the world, a lot of the world's about marketing, right? What do people think? So you said us is the best forest practices, and I have no reason to doubt, probably is. But for other people looking, when they see that, it says, yeah, this is what these people are doing, right? This is, so, and if you do sell some of the wood, then you get the, the FSC credit. So I think it's really about branding what you're doing so well. And it's just sort of the right thing to do, I think.
Yeah, it's a common statement for British Columbia to state that they have the best forest practices in the world, but it's been proven that not necessarily, right? So it's good to hear it from a third party. It provides value.
Okay. should be my last question. We'll see.
Councilman Nass asked like 5, so.
Oh, that's true.
Continue.
Oh, I get 2 more, 3 more. Good, okay. I appreciate that comment. My view of your presentation is that this should be focused mostly on conservation and maybe carbon credits and biodiversity focused rather than harvesting. Are you against, is FSC against harvesting in perhaps the way we used to do our forest 4 years ago?
Well, there's a lot of requirements in the standard. I could probably pull out 10 or 15 or show you how, you know, an industrial, I don't know how you harvested in the past, but how an industrial forest management wouldn't meet the requirement. That's why you don't see Western or Mosaic or other organizations like that FSC certified. It would just be too much of a hit to their annual level cut. They wouldn't do it. However, in your circumstance, I don't see any issues to meeting the FSC requirements at all. In the past, there might have been some indicators. You have to harvest a sustainable yield level, and that's one of the requirements, and it has to be averaged over a 10-year period. On private land, you don't have that, right? So in Crown land, you do in the province. So
yeah, I mean, people always say that's a good question, but that if you look at it, like I said, my history, you know, around harvesting, you know, we did things when I was young. We hauled logs across fish streams. We didn't get it right. We didn't know. So, would harvesting, that choice is going to be made by you guys where to set the level. But I'm a guy that made my living in forestry all my life. If I didn't think that the change in the world where you now need these types of certifications and people looking at what you're doing, I wouldn't be here talking about it. It is something, because it's such a change from when I started. And when I started even working with these guys 20 years ago, you know, I hope there's no steel workers in the room, but and I mean, I love those guys as friends, but I was called a traitor because I was working with environmentalists and people who wanted to do better forestry. But that's where the world is now. And, you know, the forests you guys got, what better way to say to the world, we're doing, I mean, you can tell them, but FSC will show what you're doing.
there's other opportunities for media around FSC too. We're engaging in a media release for Haida Gwaii to promote the media, or promote the practices of Haida Gwaii. You know, that we'll go out all around the world. So there's opportunities for social media as well with FSC. An industrial activity forest generally, you know, wouldn't make the cut for FSC, but they'd have a 15 to 20, 30% reduction in the harvest levels. You know, in the past we've seen anywhere from 10 to 30%.
So my perspective is, given our municipal forester and the skill set he has and what he's been doing in our forests over the last several years, and you know, the species at risk report and looking at the biodiversity of our forests, my view is that two things. One, I think your presentation might be premature given our review of the MFR currently, but two, I think we already hit every single one of your requirements, and since we aren't a huge forest and we're not out there marketing our wood around the world, we're picking and choosing when we harvest and where we harvest and who we sell to. So I think we already hit all your marks, and I'm not sure if our MFR requires an FSC certification. No offense, that's my personal opinion, but I think we already we hit every single box. We tick every box you've already talked about, and I just don't know if an FSC certification helps us or not.
Well, it'd be worth looking into the consideration of a carbon claim on top of your carbon credit, because I understand that your future business model is going to be heavily reliant on carbon credits.
That's to be determined.
Yeah. Good potential.
It's something that's not proven yet, so it's, there's several of us around this table that disagree with carbon credits altogether. Okay. And from that, I'll pass off the microphone. Thanks.
All right, Councillor Justice, then Councillor Stash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. You touched upon a number of advantages for getting FSC certified forests, including valuing of environmental services and locating other sources of funds and a number of others. But something else you touched on earlier was that there was some niche market potential for the wood. Can you describe what sort of added value would accrue to, say, Douglas fir wood if it came from an FSC forest, certified forest?
Yeah, I mean, over the last number of years, FSC's recognized under LEED certification and the Living Building Challenge, and other municipalities or projects have adopted FSC as a procurement process. So we do have value-added producers under that are FSC chain of custody certified that desire FSC products, right? And they'll pay a premium for FSC because they can buy it off the North Cowichan and then hold it as a credit and then use it up to 2 years later. So there's a value attached to FSC when it comes to specialty products and value-added products. I think there could be a fit with a small-scale harvesting operation.
Right. I mean, typically, what would the value be?
Well, I think it's been roughly 10 to 20% premium. In the past, there's been up to 100% premium stuff on cedar. Cedar's one kind of number one, right, in value, and then fir as well. But yeah, I've seen all over the map. But 20-30% is common premium.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Stash to close.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through Councillor Manas's discussion and what Councillor Finley brought up, actually kind of with your responses to what they were saying, answered my question was that FSC standard is the third-party accreditation that puts the actual accountability. Anybody can claim they're the best at something. We can say world's greatest dad or whatever title we want. And there's a Tommy boy saying about grade A meat in a butcher, but I won't use that anecdote here. It was a pretty funny one. But this gives us the credibility to make those claims. And I don't think anybody really has said that the North Cowichan's forests haven't been pretty remarkable forests. And that isn't the case. So, and then in Councillor Finley's questioning, you did answer that. FSC accreditation allows all spectrums of opportunities where the forest may be, from conservation all the way to harvesting. Both those spectrums can exist. It puts you to the, as to say, gold standard. And interestingly, this accreditation in the industry I'm in retail, is now similar to one of the brands, the certifications that I look to, the companies I deal with, which is now the B Corp certification. So B Corp certification is the standards that manufacturers in the retail industry and a lot of other brands, even food manufacturers, are showing that they have claims that they have the best ethical, moral, environmental, labor standards, and that someone has come in on a third party and said, yes, this company does meet those goals. We audit them every year, and they aren't just blowing smoke and saying that they're the best. They actually are. So I think for that small amount, being FSC accredited isn't a judgment on staff or the expertise in-house. It just gives you the credibility to stand on that, and now you can even shout it higher from, say, the top of one of our 6 mountains saying we are the best. So just to my understanding, just to clarity then to my question is, harvesting is a possibility and full conservation is a possibility within the spectrum of being accredited.
Absolutely.
Perfect, thank you.
Any further questions from council? All right, Mr. Quinn, Mr. Burkhoff, appreciate the presentation, and yeah, it's great to learn about this this tool that we can consider as a municipality.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Years later.
All right, moving through the agenda, we're now on to public input on agenda items. And I think everyone knows the rules for this, but it's limited to 5 speakers, 3 minutes each. And I'll start with the sign-up sheet that was distributed at the start of the meeting, and then we'll move on to the online, the virtual participants. So with the sign-up sheet here, I've got the first speaker, Joseph Enslow, regarding item 4.2.3. Mr. Enslow, if you could come up to the lectern and state your name and your address.
Thank you. Yeah, Joseph Enslow here. I live on Lane Road. As you said, agenda item 4.2.3. I'll note I am here today speaking on behalf of COPE, which is the Citizens Oversight and Accountability Project. As of this moment, we have almost 1,200 members across our various platforms. So I'm here to talk about the letter that came in from the Black Press to support local news media. It's really about Bill C-18, which is more commonly known as the Online News Act. It sparked like a lot of discourse online currently, especially about major tech companies kind of silencing news. You've probably seen it about Facebook and Meta, Google. Really a lot of the criticism as directed at tech giants and their stance on this bill. The letter that came in to North Cowichan states, "The Cowichan Valley citizen needs your assistance to safeguard the ongoing ability of our journalists to continue to report." And of course, they are referencing that their ask of North Cowichan to stop advertising on Meta and redirect the funds to themselves, as well as possibly other local news media. The shift really comes to counteract the decline in media investments. According to the letter itself, they say that the media investments have plummeted from around 23% down to around 6%. The narrative is that they present is really akin to the story of David and Goliath, where the large corporations are overshadowing the smaller entities, and this narrative has a certain allure to it, capturing attention for sure. However, just to be clear, the municipality of North Cowichan primarily employs Facebook for announcements and community updates, local notices, and public information. That's not news. So it should be distinguished as that North Cowichan doesn't produce news on Meta. While alterations in Meta's policy may affect certain entities, such as the Black Press, it's vital to recognize that our local council's communications primarily serve the purpose of keeping citizens informed about local happenings. So according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, a substantial amount of the $330 million that the bill is supposed to be bringing in, about 75% of that goes to the CBC. And according to the Alberta Weekly Newspaper Association, about 50% of media outlets won't even qualify for any of that $330 million anyways. So taking into account the insights from the Edelman Trust Barometer, the annual survey that measures trust and credibility levels, we witnessed a clear decline in Canadians' trust in published media, and that decline may correlate to why some of these media outlets are currently losing money. I know I'm almost out of time here, so I'll state, in conclusion, advocating for the creation of more of a state-funded or influenced media outlets is unlikely to enhance the delivery of community updates. So please don't exacerbate the erosion of trust that the community has, and unfortunately, maybe some media outlets are struggling. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll now invite up Adriana Richards to speak to items 4.2.1 and item 7.2. Ms. Richards, if you could state your name and your address.
Yes, hi, Mr. Mayor and Council. It's Adriana. I'm speaking on behalf of COPE and its members. I'm speaking on item 4.2.1 and 7.2. Our local councillors aware of the UN's 17 Sustainable Goals and the WEF Agenda 2030. They talk about global partnerships and local public-private partnerships used to implement these goals while shifting decision-making to a larger level, which sounds a bit worrisome for our tight-knit community. It's like we might lose some of our say in things that matter most to us. I really hope our elected officials have taken a good look at these ideas before we start teaming up with NGOs and corporations that follow these goals. It's vital for them to have our town's best interest at heart. Implementing international goals is not in your lane. The more North Cowichan partners with global NGOs, the less say residents get in the way North Cowichan continues to shape as a community. No amount of public surveys will matter if North Cowichan's beholden to and reporting to global and outside NGOs. We see the minutes from the June 27th Environmental Advisory Committee that we have partnered with Synergy. All one has to do is look at their website to the big wheel of the UN SDGs and the fact that they help companies with their ESG scores. If a company wants to partner with Synergy, they have every right, but what is a municipality partnering with a corporation whose board consists of specialists in carbon tracking, which can be found on the WEF website called My Carbon. Then we have FSC presenting today, which I had to scratch out because I wrote it before they came here. So while FSC does admirable work all over the world, I fail to see their need here or to pay $10,000 for a logo on our website and a social value score, which is an SDG. quote, FSC sets standards for forest management which include legal, environmental, social, economic, and monitoring requirements. The FSC is a multi-million-dollar global NGO that states they work to help reach 14 goals and 40 targets of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Their whole paper in the SDGs that I downloaded from their website are aimed at developing nations, and I respect their initiatives in these countries for the betterment of these places, but global goals should have no place in council. Our goals should be completely different from those of, say, the Congo. We've proven that we've met all their goals anyway in our forest reserve. We don't need them third-party auditing our forests just to keep it safe from future councils who will have the best interests of the constituents at heart. They also state the FSC foresees that the use of wood will increase, replacing unsustainable materials such as concrete, steel, and oil. Interesting. So if wood usage is going to go up, and North Cowichan partnered with an NGO, Vancouver Island Coastal Economic Development Association, a partner with Synergy, whose mission statement is to further the WEF circular economy goals, my guess is North Cowichan will continue to log our reserve for use locally, and if not, just ban wood usage in the municipality. One more sentence.
We're at time. Yeah, carry on.
You can't, on one hand, state that the OCP is not influenced by the UN and then go partner with NGO after NGO and corporations directly following the UN SDGs and WEF Agenda 2030. Please keep outside influences, especially international ones, out of our resources, businesses, and futures. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll now invite Scott Mack from Townsite Planning to speak to item 12.1. Mr. Mack, if you could state your name and address.
Thank you, Your Worship. Scott Mack, 6670 Elm Road in Lanceville, BC. I'm the managing partner for Townsite Planning. I'm here tonight to talk to you about item 12.1. You've heard me speak about this item numerous times previously, so I won't take much of your time tonight. But I did want to comment on a few things just quickly. I trust you received our letter earlier today outlining the proposal that we have made to increase our community amenity contribution in order to aid the municipality's affordable housing initiatives. Our proposal, our updated proposal of $4,000 per unit, or potentially upwards of $150,000, now more than doubles my client's previous offer of $60,000. This number also closely aligns with up-to-date CAC policies in both Nanaimo and Ladysmith, both of which have similar housing market challenges. My client is strongly committed to this project, and we believe that it will be a very strong benefit to the community of Crofton, particularly considering its walkability to virtually all of Crofton's amenities. As a result, we are hopeful that Council will agree to provide first and second reading and advance the bylaws this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions either at this time or when you have your discussion later on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. I'd now like to turn, well, first I'll ask if there's any other in-person attendees who'd like to speak. I've got Mr. Quinn and Mr. Burkhoff listed here, but I think they've left already. So I'll now turn to the virtual attendees and ask if any virtual attendees have their hands raised to speak.
We do not have any hands raised.
All right, thank you. We can now move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's item 12.1, which is the unfinished and postponed business from the July 19th meeting. The OCP Amendment Bylaw, 1711 Robert Street, number 3914, and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3915 for first and second readings. And before we resume our debate on this, and we did discuss it at length in our last meeting, I just wanted to provide a bit of clarification to Council in terms of our options here. You'll recall that the staff report from the July 19th meeting, which is included in this evening's agenda, included 4 different options. So the staff report was actually option 1, and the option that was moved and seconded and put on the floor was option 3. And the difference between option 1 and option 3 is that option 1 provided staff with direction, provided first reading to the proposal and provided staff with direction to go back to the developer and negotiate a more significant affordable housing contribution. Option 3, which was moved and seconded, included first reading and second reading and gave direction to staff to move forward with the public hearing rather than going back to the applicant and in negotiating a more significant affordable housing contribution. So council basically has a couple options here. We can vote, we can debate, and then vote on the option before us, option 3. If option 3 passes, then obviously we'll move on to a public hearing at a future meeting. If it fails, though, then we're not in a position to consider an alternative motion that would include first reading. If council does want to return to the staff recommendation, which again would involve first reading and then providing direction to go negotiate a more significant affordable housing contribution, what I have been advised by staff is that we would have a motion to withdraw this particular motion before us. If this motion is withdrawn, then we start with a clean slate, and then we can consider the initial staff recommendation. So it's up to council. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of the options here. Councillor Stash, then Councillor Manhas.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to, if that's the best way forward, I'd like to make the motion to rescind the previous motion.
Or withdraw.
Withdraw, is that the word?
Sorry, I'll turn to the corporate officer. I believe the wording was withdraw.
So it would be the person who moved the motion, they would withdraw their motion, or the person who seconded the motion would withdraw their second. So it's really up to those two people to do the withdraw, and if neither person wants to withdraw their motion or their second, then council could amend the motion to then, update the wording so it's consistent with option 1.
I think the challenge is we have so many motions that we vote on in any given meeting that I don't know if any of us can remember who moved and seconded it. You moved it? Okay. So Councillor Stash, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Manhas.
Well, I was gonna actually move that we direct staff to schedule a public hearing, because I wanted it.
Okay, so Councillor Stash.
So if I'm understanding right, is Councillor Manhas, are you asking that your existing motion stand?
Yes.
So then in that case, just to clarify, Your Worship, then the letter that was just received isn't on the record and was not part of the original motion. So the increased money is not part of this new motion. Because it's a previous motion that was not part of what was voted on and was not in the documents, and the new information emailed today would not be tied to this motion because it's a previous motion, correct?
It's getting pretty convoluted right now, and
well, just the reason I say is I wouldn't be supporting this motion from previous then, because I don't feel it properly holds account to the letter that was just received, whereas the previous option 1 allows staff to negotiate based on the new letter that was just provided to council today, which isn't on public record.
Yeah, so I'll turn to the corporate officer again, and I'm going to turn to you, Councillor Justice. But it sounds like if the mover and seconder don't want to withdraw the motion, but majority council wants to consider an alternative, then someone around this table would have to move to amend the motion.
That would be correct, and I did provide you with some language in regards to a motion to amend that. I could read it out if you like.
Yeah, so I know the corporate officer and I discussed this morning, but there's some additional information. So yeah, if you could do that, that would be great.
Okay, so the motion would be that the motion be amended to strike out and second for bullets 1 and 2 and delete bullet 3. And then once that motion was adopted, then so this is the motion that's currently on the floor to make it mirror the bullets under the recommendation, which is option 1. Of course, option 1 still has a further bullet number 4, which you could then move that as a separate motion after you amend the motion that's currently on the floor.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to a couple members of council because I think this is getting a bit clear. Basically, if the majority council wants to consider the initial staff recommendation as opposed to this motion, we would move to amend this motion to make it look like the staff recommendation.
Correct. You'd be making it look like the first.
Yeah, option 1, which was the staff recommendation. Yeah. Is that sort of clear to everyone?
Without bullet 4, because then
Not
you would
seeing
do
anyone
bullet
nodding
4
their heads.
afterwards.
Okay, all right.
I will move the amendment.
You've moved the amendment. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stash. Since you moved it, you could speak first, but Councillor Finley had his hand up, so he'll be right after you.
I'm just going on blind faith here.
All right.
There's lots of, but I think that I think we want to go back to the first recommended staff option. I think the situation's even more dire than, and this is, I need clarification on this, but more dire than Councillor Stash said, because I believe if we passed the original motion without amending it, there'd be no affordable housing contribution at all.
No, there would be, but less than what staff are recommending to council.
Okay, so it would be the original offer, part of one, okay. All right, anyway, I've moved the amendment.
So it's been moved and seconded. You've spoken on it, Councillor Finley.
My question, which should have probably come before moving this amendment, is could we just not amend the option 3 to add the increase in the CAC amount? That just seems way more reasonable. And given that the developer has stepped forward with something that wasn't required, that they have brought up as a really nice increase in funds to affordable housing, I think it behooves us to carry on with the original motion with the increase and go to public hearing. I don't think there's any reason to negotiate any further. I think they have honorably stepped forward with an increase that they didn't have to do.
So with that, just to provide some clarity, which I hope doesn't add to the confusion, the developer had originally proposed approximately a $60,000 affordable housing contribution. What staff had advised us that based on our recent policy direction, we would be looking at $400,000 approximately with development of this nature. Staff has suggested a compromise of $245,000. So 60, 411, 245 is the compromise. The developers come back with 140, so it's not quite at what staff had suggested. So what I would suggest to council is that if we did pass this amended motion, you provide an opportunity for staff to go back with the developer, look at their offer compared to what staff had initially proposed, and then to bring that back to council to determine if this new offer is in line with what staff would deem acceptable based on what the municipality is now looking for affordable housing contributions. And just keep in mind, we did get that revised offer earlier today, so I mean, if member staff wants to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe our staff have had a chance to really analyze that new number yet or compare it to what they had initially recommended to council as an appropriate amount, which again was a compromise between the draft policy and what the developer initially offered. But Councillor Finley, back to you.
I take what you're saying into account, but I think the one thing that is not included in that CAC contribution is the donation of the land as well, which Mr. Mack spelled out in his letter, which really comes up to that $250,000, give or take, that staff has recommended that we would require into the CAC. So they're providing trail land and $145,000, give or take. I think it meets the needs. These people have been waiting for years to get this development done. They got carved out of the UCB through the OCP process, and I think we need to just carry on and move on and let them do what they need to do and get some affordable housing built in Crofton. And adding $400,000 or $250,000 even in cash just adds the price of the houses that get developed. And I think that's, given the market we're in and we're looking at an affordable housing policy, I think they've been incredibly honorable by stepping forward with this amount plus the trail land. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly hasn't spoken yet, so what, Councillor Kelly and then Councillor Stash. Your mic
A
on,
lot of
Councillor Kelly.
different opinions, and I'm for this development to go through. I mean, I think this never should have been carved out of the UCB in the first place, and it just makes sense having a property right next door to sewer and water, being able to be hooked up to it. And honestly, I looked at the last meeting and watched the video of it, and to me, this just seems like it should go through, and Councillor Finley is right. These people have been trying to get this development to go through for years, And I think that we should try and facilitate that as a council. And their increase in their CACs, and with the donation of the land value of $100,000, which was also in our information on the agenda, I think this is going to work towards, you know, getting the affordable housing costs in that development itself. I mean, we don't want to increase the prices of the homes by raising the CACs to the point where people won't be able, you know, some people won't be able to afford to purchase these homes. So, in my opinion, I agree with Councillor Finley, and I think we should go with number 3 with an amendment that maybe says that we can negotiate or take the CACs that have been offered in today's email to us and apply that to that, and also go ahead with the public hearing. Thank you.
Councillor Stash.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm not, because of the lack of certainty that that letter's in there, that's why I'm for the OCP amendment. I'm for the zoning amendment. I'm for the property going forward. But to speak to what Councillor Finley says, is the reason there is this money and these community contributions being spoke to with regard to affordable housing is that none of this will be affordable housing. This is a full 100% market housing development, which they have all rights to, and that's what does, of course, as we say, the term is more stuff on the market does change affordability through supply and demand, but this is a market housing option, and that's why we have the policies in place where that if you aren't providing it, technically, if you go by our old OCP, was 10% value had to be put to that, which is actually a substantially higher amount than what's here. That's why I'm in support of going back to the one, let staff now take this letter, build it in, and in that negotiation may be that exact dollar amount. So I would be technically be supporting your motion that's on the table today, but as it stands, it doesn't allow staff to adequately engage in that. So with that, I think we need that affordable housing component to be in there, and the trail lands and parklands, that's actually already a requirement through community green space amenity contributions. So that's a requirement. They're not doing us any favors, so we shouldn't mix community contributions with regards to green spaces to community contributions with regards to affordable housing. So again, to be very clear, I'm fully supportive of this where it is in Crofton. I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to the community. Furthermore, I hope that within that development, we see that those duplexes and possibly even threeplexes are in place in there with their development so they can maximize their profits.
Thank you, Councillor Stash. I'm going to turn over to Mr. Conway, then Councillor Toporowski, and then Councillor Manhas. But what I would just suggest to Council is we did discuss this for well over an hour in our last meeting. I think I'm getting a pretty clear picture of where we're going. And if, once Mr. Conway and my two colleagues here have finished speaking, I suggest Council might want to consider testing the floor to see if there's an appetite to vote on this particular amendment. Mr. Conway.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt the debate, but I did want to make one point of clarification that just might help. So Mr. Mack's letter that came in today, that is a binding commitment. So if Council passes the resolution that was put forward at the last meeting, the commitment that was made today for the increased amount for affordable housing would still be binding. It's we haven't entered into that public hearing stage where new information can't come forward. So we're still in a period where the applicant can adjust his application. I'm not sure if that makes a difference to anybody, but I just wanted to make that clarification that that if based on the letter, we would be securing the commitment as made today going forward, and that would be put into a covenant language before the public hearing happens.
Great, thank you, Mr. Conway. Councillor Toporowski.
Thank you, Mayor. Don't know, I guess this will be for Mr. Conway, I guess, this question. Thank you. I had to catch you before you walked away. So the new homes that, if this were to pass, where's the water source for these homes coming from? Because it was mentioned One of the councillors mentioned water and sewage. So what is the water source for those new homes?
Yes, the new homes would be connected to the municipal water system and the municipal sewer system. So
And where does that water come from?
currently, Crofton gets its water from the I guess the mill water source that comes from the Cowichan River.
Thank you.
And it has the backup system from Crofton Lake.
Thank you.
Councillor Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Istas mentioned engagement. There's been engagement going on for this for the last many, many years. Well, you did. You meant that's what I made a note just now. Said that
I would like to clarify, I didn't say.
Yeah, I didn't hear the word engagement.
Okay. Anyway.
You, Councillor Manhas.
Yeah. So, anyways, but staff has been talking to, not engaging, but talking to the developer for many, many years. I think it's time to move on and talk about affordability. There's they're paying towards the affordable housing fund, and that's where instead of providing affordable housing, it's rather than marketing on, but they're providing, they are providing cash. Well, I just want to clarify for the public because you said there's no affordability in this. No, so, and we forego in Chemainus, we forego parking spots in lieu of cash. This is a similar thing of what we're doing here with the affordable housing project. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Councillor Manhas. So I'm Councillor Finlay.
So I'd just like to ask a question of Mr. Conway, if I could, regarding the park dedication and the trail dedication. Was that a requirement, or was that something that that was extra that the developer offered?
Yeah, those were negotiated with the developer. I believe the developer did offer that in the original proposal, if I recall correctly.
So there is a percentage parkland, as Councillor Stash had talked about. Is that part of that, or is that on top of that? Is there cash in lieu?
No, there's a cash in lieu instead of a parkland contribution.
Yeah. Okay,
so the trail is separate from that, and the watercourse protection. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Conway.
Yeah, there is some green space, but it's not sort of a parkland contribution. But
okay, so the trail
might be something that Ms. Von Schilling could better answer since she dealt with the application. Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, the trail is considered a right-of-way, so it's over and above the 5% cash in lieu parkland contribution. So it's the trail is land that's over and above the financial contribution at time of subdivision.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And just a question for staff before I turn to you, Councillor Stash. Typically with the amenity contributions, the idea is that as a council representing our residents, we're granting additional density for some of these sites. In exchange for that density, the municipality negotiates certain amenities, whether that's affordable housing units, an affordable housing contribution, a parkland contribution, or roadway improvements. And with this particular development, my understanding is under the current zoning, 2 units would be allowed, and I wasn't able to get clarity on whether it would be 2 buildings or 1 building, but 2 dwelling units. And we're talking about increasing the development potential up to 50 units, so a 25-fold increase in density, which I think in most communities, that level of density is a significant increase typically in land value, and in most cases a municipality would be negotiating a significant amenity contribution. But if I could get clarification from staff just on what exactly we're talking about here in terms of density increase, if that 25-fold increase estimate is in fact the correct number. Perhaps Mr. Conway could speak to that.
I can say that the property is currently zoned A2, and the A2 zoning allows 2 dwellings per parcel. The minimum lot size is 2 hectares, or about 5 acres. So I believe the density would be the 2 units as to what could be permitted on that property under existing zoning. And the proposal is to increase it to a maximum of 50, although they might not quite reach 50 depending on how the development is planned out.
Great, thank you, Mr. Conway. Councillor Stash, then perhaps we can call the question.
Thank you, Worship. On Councillor Mance, I do agree and support that in lieu support. So I just wanted to say the housing, I'm completely fine with, as long as we're doing our part to help other parts of the community on when we can find true affordability. But just to bring clarity on that trail area there, from reading the reports, that's to meet the valid concerns that the ALR has with that area, because where that trail is, it's providing the riparian buffer to protect the stream in the north end of the property. And as it's set in right here, it's just that's the vegetative and protective buffer towards the urban interface in the ALR document here. And that was part of the design plan that actually, from their wording, was what allowed them not to have any more concerns on the development in that section of the property. So the trail does provide some of the riparian and ALR buffer that they were concerned with. So it met those requirements and not so much our parkland and community green space requirements. The proponent could probably clarify on that later, but that was my interpretation.
Great, thank you, Councillor Stash. I'm going to see now if we can call the question. We've been debating this. Sorry, call the question on the amendment. So the amendment, just to be clear, and I'll turn to the corporate officer to correct me if I've got this wrong, but it's to strike out the word second out of point 1 and point 2, and then to remove point 3. And I know you'd mentioned also there was point number 4 from the original staff recommendation. Would you suggest that be considered as part of this, or as a separate motion?
As a separate motion.
As a separate motion. Okay, so we'll now call the question on the amendment, removing the word second from points 1 and 2, and removing point 3 entirely. All those in favor? And opposed? Councillors Callio, Finley, and Manhas opposed. The motion carries. So now we can consider the additional part of the original staff recommendation. So I'll read it out.
So, Mr. Mayor, you do have to now consider the motion as amended, which would now read that council give first reading to official community plan amendment bylaw number 3914, 2023, and that council give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 3915.
Yeah, and then consider the other portion as an entirely separate motion.
Oh, so you want to amend it?
Or we can consider as an entirely separate motion. That might be cleaner then.
So yes, you can just do this,
Okay.
finish it,
Yeah.
and then do number 4?
All right. Okay, so on the motion as amended, all in favor? And opposed? Councillors Finley, Manhas, and Callio opposed. Motion carries. We'll now move on to point 4 from the original staff recommendation. The council directs staff to continue discussions with the proponent regarding affordable housing community amenity contributions to seek an increase in the amount offered prior to council's consideration of second reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 3915, 2023 to a target amount of $245,000 for affordable housing. Does someone want to move that recommendation from staff? Moved by Councillor Justice, seconded by Councillor Stash. Any discussion? Councillor Finley?
I'd like to see the motion amended to say $245,000 for affordable housing, including the value of the trail land, if that's possible. I'd like to make that motion as an amendment.
So it's moved. Do we have seconded by Councillor Manhas? The amendment is to include the value of the trail, I'm assuming, in the $245,000 for affordable housing. Councillor Justice?
Sorry, can we get some clarification on the value of that trail?
Yeah, I'll turn to staff. I know we had a figure provided by the applicant, but I'm assuming staff would want to verify that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor. I assumed the motion was to refer it back to staff to negotiate the additional amounts, but include the value of that, whatever it may be, and we can evaluate that. I don't know unless staff knows what the value, but that's what I assumed the motion was.
We don't know what the value is of it. We just know what the area of it is. So there would have to be some sort of value assigned to it to be able to do that. So we'd have to come back.
All right, so it's been moved, seconded. Do we, any comments from council? All right, so the amendment to item 4 from the original staff recommendation, all in favor? And opposed? Councillors Toporowski, Stash, and Mayor Douglas opposed. The motion carries. So now on the motion as amended, and would you like me to read it out, or is everybody pretty clear? Read it out. I'm going to look to Councillor Finley to help me out here in case I get some of the wording wrong. That council directs staff to continue discussions with the proponent regarding affordable housing community amenity contributions to seek an increase in the amount offered prior to council's potential consideration of second reading of zoning bylaw number 3915 to a target amount of $245,000 for affordable housing, including the, sorry, Councillor Finley, can you help me out with the wording you suggested, or?
The value of the trail land. Or perhaps it should say to a value target of $245,000 for affordable housing, including the trail land.
Sorry, could you reword that? And I'm gonna look to our corporate officer to maybe help both of us out.
Yeah, to a target amount of $245,000, including the value of the trail land for affordable housing. Yeah, for affordable housing is wrong.
Including the value of the trail land.
Including the value of the trail land.
So is everyone clear on this? I guess the one question I'd have for staff, is there a risk that including the value of the trail land could reduce the 200
Yes.
to less than what the developers offered today?
Might, we just don't know what the value, we don't know how we'll evaluate it, whether it's pre or post zoning, but we'll try and come back with some options for council to understand.
Okay, well, we've already voted on the amendment, so Councillor Finley?
Can I amend the amendment to say to a maximum of $100,000 for the trail land?
Councillor Manhas.
Clarification from Councillor Finley there. Is it 245 plus the trail land or 245 including trail land?
Including.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Justice.
I'm afraid I just need to get some clarification of what we're voting on. I've become a little confused about where we're at here. So what the previous vote we just had was for what?
The vote we just had was, the initial staff recommendation was to secure $245,000 cash contribution.
Yeah.
In lieu of providing actual affordable housing units.
Yeah.
What Councillor Finley suggested in his amendment was that, and Councillor Finley, jump in if I'm mischaracterizing this, but basically deduct from that $245,000 the value of the trail contribution.
No, but the previous one was to set a target of 245,000, or just to move it back to staff to negotiate?
Yeah, because ultimately it's up to the developer to decide what they want to provide. So the direction council's providing staff is to go back to the developer, try to negotiate this $245,000 contribution, which is approximately $105,000 more than they're currently offering as of today. If, and again, Mr. Swaby, jump in here if I'm not portraying this accurately, if staff are unable to secure a higher affordable housing contribution, then this would come back to council with the current offer from the developer, or potentially some number in between. But what Councillor Finley's amendment has proposed is to subtract the.
I know what.
Yeah.
I know what he's proposing.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the last vote locked in.
The last vote locked in subtracting the value of that trail from the $245,000. And so what Mr. Swaby just said was, what I'd said and he confirmed, is that by subtracting the value of the trail land from the $245,000, there is the possibility that the affordable housing contribution that we're sending staff to negotiate could be less than what the developer has offered us as of today.
Can I get, can I have that, the last motion read?
So-
The amendment.
So, yeah, so basically, the last motion was just the amendment, and the amendment was to include the value of trail land at the end of bullet 4.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I would like to request a reconsideration of that vote. I believe I was voted in favor without understanding correctly what I was voting for.
I'm going to turn to the corporate officer on reconsideration, if you could just walk us through the process, because my experience is normally we would do that in a subsequent meeting.
No, he can do it, and he did vote on the prevailing side, so he is permitted to ask for it to be reconsidered, as well as yourself as the mayor under the community charter. You can you can just require the vote.
During the same meeting?
Yep.
Okay, so do we have to vote on whether or not to reconsider, or just to?
So it all depends. So if it's coming from you, you don't require a motion, you can just require the vote. So you basically erase the vote. If it comes from Councillor Justice, he requires a seconder, and then there has to, the motion on reconsideration, that passes, and then the vote is erased. So you can just erase the vote yourself.
Okay, well, that sounds the most straightforward. We'll reconsider the amendment to the motion. So again, and apologies everyone, this is getting really convoluted. And we have the former mayor in the audience here, and this is the second meeting he's come to where we've had this kind of discussion. Normally our meetings are pretty straightforward, so this isn't the norm around here. Yeah, this is for him, yeah. So what we're doing right now, council, is we're voting again on the staff recommendation, point 4, whether or not to include the amendment that was moved and seconded from Councillor Finley, and that includes adding on to the end of this staff recommendation, including the value of the trail land. So I'm going to call the...
So, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So the bullet 4 was moved and seconded. And then Councillor Finley introduced the motion to amend that to add on including the value of the trail lands. So that's what you're voting on, is that amendment.
The amendment, yeah.
So, and then you go back to the main motion.
We'll re-vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the main motion that's already been moved and seconded.
Correct.
Councillor Calia.
I just have one quick question, and that is, are we going to lose all the amenities that are given, that have been committed already if we vote on this particular amendment?
No, all we're doing with this amendment, sorry, with Councillor Finley's amendment?
Yes.
What Councillor Finley's amendment would do would include the value of the trail within that $245,000 target. Whereas what staff had recommended was having that as its own standalone target just for the affordable housing cash contribution. Yeah, all right. So we're reconsidering it, we're voting on the amendment, and it's to add on the words including the value of the trail land onto the staff recommendation that's already been moved and seconded. So all those in favor of the amendment? Councillors Finley, Manhas, and Callio, and all those opposed? Councillors Istash, Justice, Toporowski, and the Mayor. So the amendment's defeated, and now we're back to the original staff recommendation. The council directs staff to continue discussions with the proponent regarding affordable housing, community amenity contributions, to seek an increase in the amount offered prior to council's potential consideration of second reading of zoning amendment bylaw 3915, 2023 to a target amount of $245,000 for affordable housing. I should be able to read that without looking at the paper by now. So all those in favor? And opposed? Councillors Manhas, Callio, and Finley opposed. The motion carries. All right. Yeah, so just, Councillor Manhas mentioned we have a public hearing at 7. I have been advised by the corporate officer, though, that we can continue the meeting for the time being.
So, correct. We've spoken with IT, and they are going to run a banner on the live stream that advises anybody watching the live stream that the public hearing will commence following the close of the regular meeting. And as long as you advise anyone present that the public hearing will commence at the close of this meeting, you are fine, and it will start, the public hearing will start whenever this meeting ends.
So what I'd suggest to council is we do have some folks waiting in the gallery for the public hearing. However, the rest of our agenda is pretty straightforward. And I would ask council if we could get through as much as we can over the next half an hour or so. And at that point, assess if we need to take a quick recess and convene the public hearing. Let's treat this as motivation to work through our agenda quickly. I mean, we could go to public hearing. I kind of like to clean up the agenda, but. There's lots. Okay. Well, we can recess for, how about then, is there a preference for public hearing? I'm seeing 2 want to go public hearing and a couple don't. Okay, how about we take a 5-minute recess? We'll convene at 7:10 for the public hearing. And then we'll reconvene our council meeting afterwards. Yeah. So that the regular council meeting be adjourned to reconvene at the close of the public hearing. So could I get that motion? Moved by Councillor Finley, seconded by Councillor Toporowski. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. But I will ask council not to leave your seats because we can now resume our regular council meeting. Yeah, we left off at, yeah, we're on bylaws. We just dealt with item 12.1, which we moved up in the agenda. So we'll now move on to bylaws, item 9.1. Over to you, Ms. Martineau.
Okay, so miscellaneous offenses and fines amendment bylaw number 3922 received first three readings on July 19th. The bylaw, if adopted, will update the water restrictions, offenses, and fines under the bylaw offense notice enforcement bylaw and the municipal ticket information system bylaw in accordance with the changes adopted under the Waterworks Amendment bylaw number 3904. The recommendation is that council adopt miscellaneous offenses and fines amendment bylaw number 3922 2023.
Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Justice, seconded by Councillor Finley. Any discussion? Councillor Stash?
Yeah, just a quick question on clarity from staff on it. I was just curious, and especially because we're in the light of stage 4, it said for using sprinklers, when you look at Schedule 1, it says sprinklers is $300, but then you go to Schedule 2 and it's $600.
What's new ones, isn't it?
There's one, is Schedule 1 old versus, and Schedule 2 new, or?
No, so I'll turn to staff to explain it more fully, but the Schedule 1 is the bylaw offense notification, which is typically lower fine amounts, but not necessarily the same amount of proof required to show that there was a violation of the bylaw, whereas the municipal ticket information, there is municipality is required to do a lot more work to prove that there was a violation, but does provide the opportunity to collect a higher fine. I will turn to Ms. Martineau to elaborate on that.
So I will explain the difference between, so you have your bond bylaw and your MTI bylaw. So your bond bylaw, it allows you to add fines up to $500. Any disputes are done through an adjudication system, which it's a less onerous process and a less costly process than disputes through, like if an MTI is issued. Under the MTI system, fines can be issued up to $1,000. One other clarification between the two, with the bond system, a ticket can be mailed to a person. With an MTI system, the ticket has to be served on a person. So there are two different types of tickets with the MTI as well. So if it's disputed, you have to go to the court for a judge to do it. So it has more cost for the municipality because we'd have a lawyer going to court to ask the judge to uphold the ticket. So which is why the fines are higher, because it's a higher cost for the municipality to, if a ticket is disputed. It also provides, when the ticket's not disputed, it's an extra tool in bylaw enforcement officers' pockets so that for a first offense, they can issue a bond. And if it's a repeat offender and they want to provide a higher fine, they can use an MTI. So it's typically, they're going to always use the bond because it's a much simpler system.
Fantastic response. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So then to be mindful of residents while we're in level 5 drought right now, it's a $600 fine if it's very clearly caught in contravention. That can be easily enforced.
Councillor Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the public needs to know about our water supply out there. I get a lot of questions about how, the rivers are dry and what's our water supply at. I think it'd be prudent for maybe Mr. Reitzma to get a message out there to the public that our water is actually at very, very good levels. Our aquifers are healthy. Because that, if the Cowichan River is low, it doesn't actually correspond to actually our aquifers. I think that message needs to get out to our people.
Mr. Swaby?
Mr. Mayor, we're happy to work on a public communication that we can get out to the community. That'll help.
All right. Any further comments from council? Got a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We move on to item 9.2. Over to you, Ms. Martina.
Okay, so zoning amendment bylaw number 3912 received first and second readings on June 7th and was considered at a public hearing on July 19th before receiving third reading. Following third reading, it was determined that a covenant was not required. Therefore, the bylaw is back before council for adoption. If adopted, 7325 Osborne Bay Road will be added to the list of properties exempted under section 53 sub 4E of the zoning bylaw and will be permitted a maximum of 2 residential dwellings on the property. The recommendation is that council adopt zoning amendment bylaw number 3912, 2023.
Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Finley, second by Councillor Stash. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 9.3, over to you, Ms. Martina.
Okay, so zoning amendment bylaw number 3919 is before council for first and second readings. The bylaw proposes to amend section 56 sub 4 of the zoning bylaw to permit a maximum of 2 residential dwellings at 6344 Woodgrove Way. The recommendation is that council give first and second readings to zoning amendment bylaw number 3919, 2023, and authorize a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 2019, 2023.
Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Justice, second by Councillor Finley. Any discussion? Councillor Justice?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this proposed change. This property is outside the growth boundary in land designated as rural residential. And as I read the OCP, it does permit detached accessory dwellings in this land designation under certain circumstances, and that is either where servicing connections are available already or where there's adequate on-site septic treatment and water supply can be achieved. So as I understand it, that is the case for this property, and that common treatment and water supply are available. But as a general point, which pertains not to this particular decision, but to the development of our new zoning bylaw, I think it's really important that we remain clear that accessory dwelling units are treated differently by the OCP inside and outside the growth boundary. And allowing accessory dwelling units is an important part of our approach to housing and affordable housing. And the OCP directs us to encourage accessory dwelling units inside the growth boundary. However, as we've just seen for accessory dwelling units outside the growth boundary, the OCP only prescribes them under those limited conditions that I just read, which are slightly different conditions than from our old second dwelling in rural lands policy. So I just think it's, as we move forward to the zoning bylaw, it's really important that we keep that distinction between accessory dwelling units inside and outside the growth boundary. But I do support this as it fits the OCP.
Great, thanks, Councillor Justice. We ready to call the question? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. Sorry, could Councillor remind me, did we move points 1 and 2 or just point 1? Both, okay. Item 9.4 is on amendment bylaw number 3920 for first and second reading. Over to you, Ms. Martina.
Okay, so zoning amendment bylaw number 3920 is before council for first and second readings. The bylaw proposes to create a new CD24 zone, the Village Residential Infill Comprehensive Development Zone, by adding it to the zoning bylaw as section 80.24 and to create a split zone at 3351 Ohaniki Road to facilitate a future 2-lot subdivision by reclassifying the property from R3 Residential 1 and 2 Family Zone to R3-S Residential Small Lot Single Family Zone and CD24 Village Residential Infill Comprehensive Development Zone. The recommendation is that council give first and second readings to zoning amendment bylaw number 3920, 2023, and authorize a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 3920, 2023.
Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Manna, second by Councillor Toporowski. Councillor Justice.
I will speak in favor of this recommendation. I think as pointed out in the staff report, this proposal does fit well with the village residential land use designation. And those are lands that the OCP has determined are capable of accommodating significant new housing growth. I do have a question though that I would like to ask planning staff, and again, I think this is more relevant to the zoning bylaw than this particular decision, but I'll take the opportunity to ask anyway. And the question is, in addition to providing multifamily housing, the OCP says that we will define success in our treatment of the village residential land designation based on a high standard of architectural as well as street design, which creates a pleasant and welcoming environment. I guess the question is there a way that in general, not for this particular CD24 zone, but in general for zones inside the village residential land designation, is there a way we can encourage good design in the rezoning process? Or is there a different mechanism to achieve that goal for this land designation?
Mr. Conway?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The rezoning process is primarily dealing with land use and density, but the urban design sort of considerations that happen with development are quite important too. The development permit process is really the way that we get at that primarily. With larger rezoning applications, we do try to have an understanding as to what the sort of the built form will be, and trying to make sure that it's going to be generally compliant, and then rely on the development permit process to fine tune it and sort of deal with the specifics. In this case, we don't have a development proposal, so it's difficult to get at it through the rezoning. So but we still have the development permit process, and any future proposal for this property would need to comply with the development permit guidelines.
Just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my experience in past with some CD zones that have been done, there are requirements in the zone regulations, if that's the right word, for design elements, including elements that relate to the articulation with the streetscape, things like fencing requirements and parking requirements and those sorts of things that aren't in this zone. And I do recognize this is just a one property CD. Yeah. But I mean, in general, as we move forward into the zoning bylaw, creating zones within this in this village residential land designation, are we going to be able to find ways of fulfilling the promise of the OCP?
Yeah, there are such things as they're called form-based zoning that try to set out some of those requirements in the zoning itself to, for example, pushing buildings out to the street and maybe having set kind of stepped height requirements so that the building, the massing of the building is kind of back a little bit. Those types of things can sometimes be written into the zoning. It's a pretty blunt instrument though, so most of our zones now do not have that kind of content in it, and I don't know, I would say my experience with it is it's very difficult to apply that way, and you're often finding that the zoning requirements don't really accomplish what you're wanting to accomplish anyways. We can certainly look at those types of things. I think for Main Street type development and in the village core areas, that type of zoning can work a bit better. What I would say is we can look at it and maybe consider if there's opportunity to do it. But we certainly, it would not be a substitute for the development permit requirements. They're really what we rely on heavily to try to achieve a good standard of urban design.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Councillor Stash.
Thank you, Your Worship. Quick question for Mr. Conway was, just because it's relevant, I've seen emails to council in regards to noise concerns on, within the proposal, and it's not to this one, I'll be voting to approve this one, but it was just regards to like refrigeration units, air conditioning units, heat pumps, and possible noise concerns when it gets to setbacks. Are there any other, by reducing the setback, which is fine, are there other tools that can, you know, mitigate any concerns being that close to property lines?
Yes, I mean, there are different ways of regulating heating and cooling equipment, the noise levels. A decibel standard is one way to get at it. We're in an interesting time where we're really trying to promote heat pumps and energy efficient type equipment. And the equipment itself has gotten considerably better. It's not nearly as noisy as it was. We have in recent times have had, I think we even did bring forward some amendments to the zoning bylaw, what we call housekeeping amendments, to try to reduce the setbacks for heat pumps, but there were some concerns about noise, and those amendments were never made. So we currently have a very high setback for heat pumps, and that's regularly an issue for people wanting to install them on their properties. It is an issue that's going to be brought back as part of that the general regulations in the new zoning bylaw, and we'll be looking for some direction from council as to how you balance the sort of trying to accommodate heating and cooling equipment and encourage it with addressing potential nuisance impacts from noise and
Thank you. I think you touched on it there, because I've already noticed on my street, the new ones I can't even hear pretty much, and the older units you can. So I think technology's dealing with it. So I think you've seen that in there. So on a setback requirement, there would just be kind of like saying it needs to be a modern, high efficiency, low volume unit if you're getting a setback easement or reduction. So that sounds great. Thank you, because I'm an advocate of heat pumps as a user myself. So thanks.
Mr. Conway, I had a quick question for you as well. I know there has been discussion around this table in the past and the previous council around the new official community plan reducing development potential in some of the rural areas. However, the thinking with the new official community plan was always to provide more development opportunities within the growth centers and the urban containment boundary. And I noticed the report from your department speaks to this, that the applicant actually had brought forward a development that proposed a much more modest increase in the density, and using the direction policy from the official community plan, your department was able to suggest to the developer to come back with something a bit more ambitious. Just wondering if you could speak to that, this particular proposal, and also more broadly to the official community plan actually encouraging more development in certain parts of the municipality.
Yeah, we've had a few conversations with landowners similar to what's happened with this application, where the proponent comes in and the density is actually a little bit less than what the zoning bylaw is recommending. So we are trying to find ways that we can realize that vision of what the OCP is trying to achieve, and make sure that the lands within those core areas are used as efficiently as possible and are set up so that they can accommodate a good amount of housing on them. These are examples of, or at least this one that's before you is an example of pre-zoning, which can be an effective way to get housing, because the zoning, once it's in place, if somebody wants to act on it, they don't have to go through that whole drawn out rezoning process. So I think we'll be coming forward with some select recommendations for where pre-zoning might be appropriate within the core areas as part of the bigger project. But it's, it's certainly a conversation that we're having with a number of the owners, and the reception to it's been pretty good. There's a bit of a mindset change that's happening, I think, just with the type of housing we're seeing in our region, and so some of the landowners we talk to they're more sort of tuned into duplexes and triplexes or single family dwellings, and we're sort of having to nudge them more to that sort of higher density stuff, and but it's going in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Justice. So your hand went up?
Yeah, thank you. Just following up on that subject, one of the worries about pre-zoning for higher density is that you lose the ability to negotiate for community amenities, but you have in this case managed to lock that into the zoning amendment language, right? So can you just speak to that as a phenomenon? Is that something that's generalizable to the zoning bylaw?
Yeah, it is a consideration. So when pre-zoning happens, there is that potential loss of the ability to negotiate for community amenities or infrastructure, other kind of features. So with this particular application, we did feel it was necessary to have something in place. So the landowners agreed to having a covenant registered on the property that would require the contribution to happen when development happens. So that seems like a compromise. We're going to have to do a bit more work on that if we do this, if we do pre-zoning in a larger way. It is possible to do density bonusing where you build some of that into the zone itself. So in order to access the additional density, there's contributions or something that the landowner would have to provide as specified in the bylaw to be able to access the density. But it's all very transparent, and the big advantage of it is that it saves a lot of time if somebody wants to develop, and they may still have to provide the amenities and the other features. So, yeah.
All right, I think we've got a motion on the floor and seconded. We ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to item 9.5. Over to you, Ms. Martineau.
Okay, so zoning amendment bylaw number 3925 is before council for first and second readings. The bylaw proposes to reclassify 3211 Malcolm Road from R1 residential rural zone to R3 residential 1 and 2 family zone to facilitate a two-lot subdivision. The recommendation is that council give first and second readings to zoning amendment bylaw number 3925-2023 and authorize a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 3925-2023.
Moved by Councillor Justice, seconded by Councillor Finley. Any discussion, Councillor Justice?
Sorry, I had fun with the agenda this week. I'm obviously in favor of this motion. The properties inside the growth boundary designated residential neighborhoods, so the proposed changes seems well aligned with the OCP vision, but I do have another question for planning staff about the land designation. So in terms of the objective for the designation residential neighborhood, in addition to allowing gentle infill, there are other OCP objectives, including maintaining canopy cover, preserving mature trees and existing landscaping, and supporting wildlife such as birds and pollinators. It's difficult to tell with this particular application. It looks to me like the new property might be taking out most of the mature trees on the property, but I'm really not speaking to the application per se, but to the general sort of zoning bylaw. How will those sorts of objectives, maintaining canopy cover, mature trees, pollinators, wildlife, how will those objectives be codified into the new zoning bylaw, or do they need to be, does there need to be a different mechanism such as a tree protection bylaw for ensuring that those OCP objectives are met?
I'll take a stab at it. Before doing that, though, I did want to introduce Sarah Folks. She's our new development planner. She was working on the subdivision team previously, but we've kind of pulled her into the development planning team. This is part of the additional resourcing that council authorized in the last budget cycle. And Sarah was the one that did the report, but I won't throw that question to her. Like that. At least not yet.
Throw her into the fire.
Yeah, it's tempting because I'm not sure I have an answer, but yeah. So our zoning process doesn't really get at this. If there's a desire to maintain tree canopy cover, that would generally have to be done through some other mechanism. It's probably not a very satisfying answer, but.
Well, if you don't mind, I mean, it's not if there's a desire, I mean, it is an objective in the OCP land designation description, so yes, there's a desire according to the OCP, so the question is how do we achieve that? Because it's, of course, this isn't just all boiled down to density, because there's all sorts of objectives in these land designations, right? We have to figure out how to achieve, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, it could be any number of things that, from a tree protection bylaw to an urban tree strategy where there's a planting program. There could be tree canopy regulations that are invoked through the bylaw as well. We don't have those in our current zoning bylaw. We are doing that in the Bell McKinnon area, so it is happening there, but it's not entrenched in bylaw. It's more of a negotiation thing currently that happens with the applications as they come forward. But on these smaller single-family lots, there isn't really anything specific that we're doing around that.
Okay, thanks.
So did we move it or second it? Yeah, okay. Any further discussion from council? All right, all in favor and opposed? Motion carried. We now move on to item 9.6. Ms. Martineau?
Okay, so towing and vehicle impound bylaw number 3923 and fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3921 are before council for first three readings. The towing and vehicle impound bylaw number 3923 proposes to authorize the removal, establish the rules and responsibilities for towing companies that they must adhere to, the collection of impoundment fees, and the release and or disposal of RVs, trailers, and vehicles parked in violation of traffic bylaw number 2276 and or highway use bylaw number 2261. Fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3921 proposes to amend the fees for towing from $50 to actual costs and the impoundment fee from $5 per day to the actual cost to cover the costs incurred during the removal of trailers, RVs, and other vehicles parked illegally. The recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to towing and vehicle impound bylaw number 3923, 2023, and fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3921, 2023.
We have a mover. Moved by Councillor Callio, second by Councillor Manhas. Any discussion? Councillor Stash?
When I was rereading again, I just need to double check in the bylaw. I thought based on the input from the Chemainus Chamber and the BIA that it was 4 hours for the Croft Street.
Yeah, I think that may be because the original report was attached to the updated report.
Okay, so it is, there's a lot to read there and I just hadn't noticed. Is it 4 hours on Croft Street?
So that regulation is in the traffic bylaw, so that's a different bylaw. So,
okay, so we're talking just the towing, right?
We're just talking about
so that was
the towing.
a distractor to my mind. Thank you for the clarity.
Councillor Justice?
Thank you. I'd like to have some clarification from staff on the relationship, I guess, between a bylaw and then how a bylaw is applied. And I guess what I'm thinking about here is some of these vehicles are housing people who might not otherwise be housed. And I guess if we're, wanting to ensure that people who are in such situations are, treated nicely, given fair warning, perhaps even help to find another place to either move to or to move a vehicle to. That's not something that shows up in this bylaw, but is it something that by policy we would have in terms of the way we enforce the bylaw? How do we embed that sort of level of compassion into a bylaw which could be applied in a pretty blunt and harsh way?
Mr. Swaby, you want to answer that?
Absolutely. Ms. Ferris is here, our manager of bylaw, and she can talk to the efforts that we make to gain compliance before we take such actions as this, because Councillor Justice is absolutely correct. Not only is it disruptive to potentially a home, it also is very expensive this process to get the vehicle back, if the towing company happens to be in Nanaimo. Currently, I'm not aware of any in North Cowichan that likely can manage RVs as a towing site. So it will be extremely expensive for them to get the vehicle back once we tow it. It's a very significant issue. And Ms. Ferris, I see she's here. She can talk to how much effort we make.
Ms. Ferris?
Yes, thanks through the mayor. I can certainly speak to that. Our staff deal with all bylaws, all the same, which definitely starts with a lot of education and, quite frankly, a lot of compassion to deal with any bylaw. And especially when it comes to any unhoused people, we reach out and do everything we can before we make that move. So we do a lot of education. We do a lot of time with the people that we're dealing with. We may start ticketing to get their attention a bit about what we want, and if that doesn't happen, then we do have to look at other tools in the toolbox. But when it does come to displacing anybody, we certainly make every effort to be compassionate and to offer them any other means that we can help them in that way. So how we can embed that in a bylaw is difficult, but I guess I can just assure you that that's how we deal with all people that we deal with, like I say, especially with the unhoused in this situation. And there is a variety of different registered owners that deal with these. So we do deal with quite a cross of people that are either just parking there because they just don't want to move, or they have other options, but they don't move until we tell them. So we do have a variety of different reasons that people are even in the area. So, and just to speak to one thing that Ted mentioned, I am in the midst of getting a service provider that might be closer, possibly in Ladysmith. So we do have some other options that will certainly reduce some of the costs. So I'm just in conversations right now with some service providers on that end of things. So, but to answer your question, Councillor, we certainly deal with people very compassionately.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Ms. Ferris. Okay, we'll call the question then on the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to reports, and we already dealt with item 10.1, so we'll move to item 10.2. Over to you, Mr. Swaby.
Mr. Swaby, if I could just interrupt for 1 second, this might be a good opportunity for council to pass a motion to extend the meeting, because you have 12 minutes left before your meeting ends.
Extend to 9 o'clock. Moved by Councillor Toporowski, second by Councillor Justice. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 10.2, Mr. Swaby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is regarding Seawave License of Occupation. Seawave is the Cowichan Women Against Violence Society. And the purpose of this application is to review and approve a license of occupation agreement to the Cowichan Women Against Violence Society for the use of a portion of municipal property at 6002 Canada Avenue, which is our pump station. The recommendation is that staff, that council approve the 5-year license of occupation with the Cowichan Women Against Violence Society for green space over a portion of 6002 Canada Avenue.
Councillor Manhas moved it. Yeah. Councillor Toporowski second. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. Item 10.3.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is regarding asset management, an update. The purpose is to provide this update on asset management activities and obtain council's approval for a grant application to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Asset Management Planning Program. And the recommendation is that council support an application to the Asset Management Planning Program for a grant of up to $25,000 for the creation of an asset management plan for parks, infrastructure, and support overall grant management for the project.
We have a mover, moved by Councillor Staff, seconded by Councillor Justice. Any discussion? Councillor Justice, then Councillor Finlay.
I have a couple of questions for staff. I guess probably for Ms. Soldera. The last time staff discussed annual average life cycle costs and with council, I believe we were told that the estimated amount we would need to be saving every year to adequately repair and replace our existing infrastructure. And I guess I'm thinking about linear assets primarily. That amount had increased substantially, even dramatically, I believe. Anyway, and acknowledging the difficulty of estimating future replacement costs, I wonder if you could tell us what is the current best estimate of the annual average life cycle cost for linear assets, and in addition to that, how much we're actually putting away for them? Do we have those estimates?
So as is noted in the report, we are working on getting a more detailed report for council on where we're at with respect to all of those items. It'll be coming forward to council within the next few months.
Okay. May I have a second? So when I was at the LGLA, I had a conversation with a guy called David Allen, who is the ED of Asset Management BC. And we're talking about the linkage between asset management and land use decision making. And it was my understanding that from that conversation that it would be kind of a reasonable part of an asset management strategy to have a process for every land use decision point, or at least big land use decision points, for assessing the long-term infrastructure and servicing costs, and whether ultimately the development is financially viable for the municipality. So I guess there's new infrastructure that accrues, but it also has impact on existing services and infrastructure in terms of their remaining capacity and so on. So would that sort of process be a reasonable thing to consider for an asset management strategy, or is that something that we're looking into?
Absolutely. So as also noted in the report, we're working on an asset management strategy now that will detail some of the processes and procedures that we need to take and to bring forward for council consideration as we complete more detailed asset management plans for each of our asset classes.
Okay, thanks.
Any further discussion from council? Call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. Item 10.4. Over to you, Mr. Swaby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item relates to the Environmental Advisory Committee comments on the draft biodiversity assessment report, and the purpose is to consider its recommendations to the changes to the draft North Cowichan biodiversity assessment report prepared by Diamond Head. And the recommendation, which we'll put on the screen, Mr. Mayor, is that council directs staff to work with Diamond Head Consulting to incorporate the following comments and suggestions from the June 27, 2023 EAC meeting. That's the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting into the draft policy report. And I'll just read, there's 11 recommendations. One is enhance and emphasize relationships and connectivity to other and adjacent jurisdictions, managing biodiversity in North Cowichan and identifying actions underway by other jurisdictional partners, for example, the Minister of Agriculture for agricultural lands. 2, clarify agricultural types and areas, i.e. grasslands, cropland, and definition of biodiversity types within different agricultural jurisdictions and activities. 3, consider the importance of protection and clarity of restoration terminology when considering areas of lower biodiversity ranking for policy development, consideration in areas with potentially higher historical biodiversity rankings. 4, include missing biodiversity threats of forest conversion to agricultural land, loss of forest lands and groundwater retention, water pollution, industrial and infrastructure uses. 5, provide an indication of what kind of ecosystem is predicted in 2040 with climate change or large disturbances. 6, develop plain language summaries at each phase of the report development to capture what was learned for public communication. 7, use alternative language for green infrastructure network such as Habitat Network. 8, provide Habitat Network between Somenos to Mount Provost, Somenos to Maple Mountain, and south of Highway 18. 9, use First Nations individual names when referring to Indigenous populations. 10, change language in section 8.3 to clarify that Indigenous practices were stopped. And 11, add area of coastal Douglas fir with and without forest cover. That is the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Justice.
I would move the recommended motion.
Seconded by Councillor Stash. Any discussion? Councillor Dobrowski. And Councillor Justice and Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mayor. Just clarification on number 10, the change language in section 8.3. to clarify the indigenous practices were stopped. Just wondering what that is referring to.
Mr. Conway.
Or Mr. Preakshaw?
Mr. Preakshaw, Dr. Preakshaw.
Dr. Preakshaw.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. In response to the question, the specific issue was with regard to First Nations management of certain ecosystem types.
No, that's fine.
All right, Councillor Justice.
I just wanted to say that I attended the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting where this issue was discussed, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. Not only did Councillor Callie do a fantastic job of chairing, but the rest of the committee was very impressive also. And in fact, blow your mind, right? Like they're just really powerhouse. So.
Councillor Finlay.
Just so I understand, if we vote on this recommendation, then these comments and suggestions are going to be included in the policy report, draft policy report?
I'll turn to staff to elaborate on it. My understanding is following this meeting, staff discussed it with the consultant and they'd indicated it was relatively straightforward to incorporate it into the report, but I'll turn to Dr. Preakshaw to elaborate on that.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, that characterization is correct. There we'll be incorporating these suggestions, I'd call them first, to the extent that they can, and where they feel that they may fall short of the mark due to inconsistencies with items elsewhere, they might report back. But the representative from Diamond Head helped craft the recommendation with their own notes and did not indicate that any of the items were going to pose a problem for completion of the report.
Follow up. So I've got a couple of concerns with these recommendations. One of my concerns is that these recommendations in the biodiversity assessment report might handcuff all development outside of urban containment boundaries in North Cowichan. You know, the conversion of agricultural or forced conversion to agricultural land, I think that's coming out of something that just recently happened with Unsworth Vineyard. That concerns me if it meets the requirements of the land use and ALR. You know, providing an indication of what ecosystems is predicted in 2040 with climate change. We can't even figure out what the climate's going to be next week, let alone trying to figure out what it's going to be in 2040. And number 11, I just would clarify, where are we adding the area of coastal Douglas fir with and without forest cover? What section is that? And is that going to infringe on any sort of MFR development in the future, however that happens to be?
So Mr. Mayor, Dr. Preakshaw can provide an overview of that, but just a reminder that these would be incorporated into the draft biodiversity, which would then come back to council, and you would have a fuller picture of how these get integrated into the plan at that point. Dr. Preakshaw, can you enlighten any further on that?
Yeah, I guess most simple answer I can give to those concerns, which are good questions, is that it's simply providing quantitative evidence of the biological assets. Policy decisions will be coming, policy recommendations will be coming out of the next phase of this project. So some of the policy implications that are raised are not going to really be ironed out until the next few months unfold and we complete our engagement with First Nations. And at the end of that, the biodiversity assessment, like I said, isn't, I don't think it's intended to handcuff development one way or another, just provide a quantitative accounting for some of the environmental assets that would be considered along with the social and economic aspects of any decision that would go into choosing a particular development. And with respect to the forest cover in particular, it's looking largely at assets in the municipal forest reserve, but as we outlined in the scope of work, this is not intended to second guess or try to gainsay anything that will be done in the Municipal Forest Reserve review.
Thank you, Dr. Preekshot. Any further questions from council? Councillor Calia.
I just have one quick one. I was at this meeting and chaired it, and number 9, which is listed there, the use First Nations individual names when referring to Indigenous population. I don't really remember that coming up, and I'm just wondering what that refers to. For example, is it when we're starting the meeting? Is it necessary to name each individual First Nations band in the local area, or like I normally do, I use the Coast Indigenous, Coast Salish peoples?
Yeah, I'll turn to Dr. Preekshot on that one.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I think it's just intended to be specific when dealing with a particular First Nation in parts of the report where, as opposed to using a generic term First Nations for referring to a biological asset that is in, say, halal land, for example, that we use the term halal rather than First Nations if there's a specificity associated with that particular ecosystem or environment.
Thank you.
All right, we ready to vote on the recommendation? All in favor? And opposed? Councillors Finley and Manas opposed. Motion carries. We'll now move on to item 10.5. Mr. Swaby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this Economic Development Committee report is to seek council's adoption of the committee's 2023 work plan. And the recommendation is that council adopt the Economic Development Committee's 2023 work plan appended to the August 16, 2023 report from the Climate Change Specialist as attachment 2.
Would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Stash, seconded by Councillor Toporowski. Any discussion? Councillor Finley.
So I know we obviously had this at the EDC meeting and we went over a bunch of stuff. There is one item of concern that I have that I've looked into a lot more since that meeting, and it is on page. It's actually funny because Ms. Richards spoke to it slightly earlier, and it's this idea of a circular economy. The Circular Economy Accelerator Program that Viceda has is quite interesting, but when you look deeper into that plan, that circular economy plan on paper, it sounds interesting that we're going to do everything we can to keep, renewing items and recycling as much as we can. But when you do go deeper into Viceda's website and their report and Synergy Group's website, it gets a little bit UN-ish, let's just say it, UN-ish, because that's how Ms. Richards said it. And I think we particularly here need to be careful moving forward, especially the three of us on the EDC, that we're making sure that we're focusing on what's absolutely important to North Cowichan residents and businesses, and not necessarily what is on a plan on a website that was created by unelected people. So I just wanted to put that forward, that it is a concern of mine, given the bit of a rabbit hole I went down reading up on this a little further over the last couple of days.
Great, thanks, Councillor Finley. Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded, the recommendation. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to we'll now move on to new business. So the first item here is 13.1, the CVRD appointments for the new recreation commissions. So I'm hoping this doesn't get more convoluted than our discussion of the Robert Street rezoning proposal. I do have a suggestion for council on how to distribute these appointments. I have spoken to some of you who have indicated your preference, or I've tried to convince some of you to take on some appointments maybe that aren't ideal, but I'd just like to walk you through it, and if you don't like it, we can do something totally different. So what I've suggested here is, I have heard 3 you did reach out to me and indicate your preferences. So what I'm suggesting is the Cowichan Core Recreation Commission would be Councillor Finley and Councillor Justice. The Cowichan North Commission would be Councillor Estache and Councillor Toporowski, who obviously live in the Chemainus area, so a bit more convenient for them. That leaves the three other appointments that are outside of our municipality and for many of us, like, out of the way. So I'm asking Councillors Manhas and Councillors Callio to join me in taking on one of these appointments for the time being. I'm happy to volunteer. I was going to suggest I could take the South Recreation Commission because I do live in more the southern part of the municipality. And I know, Councillor Manhas, you have a connection to Cowichan Lake. Yep. And there's one left, so I was going to hope, and Councillor Kelly, you could take it on for the time being. Yeah. And none of this is set in stone. If, you know, a few months from now we decide this isn't working, we can always change it up. So that's what I was going to recommend to council. And in terms of the alternates, what I thought was maybe to just flip the suggestions for the Cora North. So you'd have Councillors Finley and Justice as the alternates for North, and then Councillors Estache and Toporowski for the alternates for Core. And then I would ask, I put down Councillor Callio, it could be Councillor Manhas as my alternate for South, and then I would put myself down as both of your alternates for Cowichan Lake. Councillor Estache?
You have quite a bit on your plate. I'd be happy to be the alternate for Cowichan Lake Recreation.
All right, well, I'm not going to say no. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you've got a lot. You've got enough on your plate. You don't need to go out to Lake Cowichan.
All right. Sound reasonable? All right. And Mr. Ozinga's been waiting here for hours for us to finally arrive at this moment. And I really wish, looking back, that I'd moved this up in the agenda, but yeah, still shorter than a CVRD meeting, so. Yeah. So, yeah, if council's, I'll turn to the corporate officer. Can we move these in, like, all four recommendations at once, or break them up in?
But we're not really clear on all of them. So you
So
can do
it's-
it all as one motion, that's fine. So for the first one, for Cowichan South, it's yourself,
And Councillor Callio as the alternate.
the alternate, okay.
And then for North, it's Councillor Estache and Toporowski, and Finley and Justice as the alternates.
Okay.
Core is Councillors Finley and Justice as the appointees, with Estache and Toporowski as the alternates. And for Cowichan Lake is Councillors Manhas and Callio, with Councillor Estache as alternate for both of them.
Okay, got it.
All right, so we got a mover? Moved by Councillor Toporowski, seconded by Councillor Finley. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. I understand we did have a couple other items under new business that were pulled from the consent agenda. Oh, just one. So
Yep.
So what was it? Oh. All right.
I don't know if I should have had my microphone on. It's item 4.1.3.
So Councillor Manhas and I recuse ourselves for the reasons we explained at the start of the meeting, and I'll turn the chair over to you, Councillor Toporowski. That's right here.
No, Deborah will take all the questions.
There you go. You phone from the hallway. Okay. Okay, so now I'm up here, and all right, so this is under new business. I pulled item 4.1.3, Clement Center for Families, regarding Clement Center for Families visit. The recommendation was that council authorize Mayor Douglas to advocate on behalf of the Clement Center for Families to the province on the following through on their commitments under Pathway to Hope initiative. So I would like to change the authorization as acting mayor, to be acting mayor instead of Mayor Douglas, to avoid any perception of conflict. Can I get a mover for that? Moved by Mr. Councillor Stash, and seconded by Councillor Callio. You have a question?
Just for clarification, we're not voting to make you mayor and him.
Oh, Michelle, does that actually read that way? Just kidding. No, just kidding. No, that's not what it is. Any further questions? Okay, all in favor? All against? No? I mean, thank you. That's it. It's passed, and we can call the mayor back in.
So I believe that concludes new business. Yes. And we can now move on to question period. So I'll start and ask if there are any members of the public who have any questions for council. Yeah, please step up to the lectern.
My name is Donna Stafford-Tyrrell. I live at 9998 Beach Drive, and the former mayor still doesn't recognize me. We have a lot of vehicles on our street. The beach side of the street has younger people. The other side of the street has several widows, about to have some more. And
Mr. Mayor, I think the hearing has been closed.
Yeah, I'm sorry, ma'am, but because we've concluded the public hearing, we can't receive any further information on the application.
that's not what I'm going to talk about.
Okay, so you're not talking about the application that we just voted on?
No.
But what is it, because the topic that you're discussing has to be something on the agenda.
Bylaws.
So which bylaw?
About, yes, enforcement, that's
Okay.
exactly it.
Oh,
And
with,
I would like,
the traffic,
I would also like to have a report or a phone call back. Basically, that's my problem. I phoned in, left a message. I also left a message about the method for the hearing.
Okay.
And I heard, and have to compliment her. Her name was Carol, and I didn't get the rest of the name, but she was excellent.
Yeah, if you leave your contact information, we can ensure someone gets back to you.
Certainly.
Thank you. All right, I'll now turn to virtual attendees. I don't see any virtual attendees, but I'll ask IT staff if anyone's called in to participate in question period.
There are no hands raised.
All right, that concludes our meeting. Declare this meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.